So I'll let the rest of the commissioners introduce themselves, starting with Vice Chair Zarnowitz.
Yes, I'm Jill Zarnowitz from the area of Yamhill.
Mark Labhart, Eastern Oregon at large, and I live in Sisters.
Bob Spellbrink, Siletz, Oregon.
We have to hide representing all of the fish and wildlife of all of Oregon. Kathy and Khalil, yes, I'm Jill Zarnowitz.
Congressional District 2.
And also the river, because it changed large, and I live in Sisters.
Thank you.
Bob Spellbrink, Siletz, Oregon.
Thank you.
We have to hide.
Good morning, happy New Year. It's good to see you all.
All right, well, good morning. Happy New Year. It's good to see you all in person again. And we have a pretty manageable agenda today, so hopefully we'll be able to get you out of here before sunset, which happens fairly early still. We do have a number of director's report items that we're going to go through here. And I just also wanted to alert you all again. I know I sent it to you in a note, but just for the record, it's going to be the Governor Kotek's new natural resource policy advisor at 9. So I'm going to step out a little bit before 9, and then I should be back shortly after 9:30. Davia or Debbie or Shannon will come sit in the director's seat when I go to that meeting. So with that, we do. Oh, sure. And let's go to Michelle Tate. Would you like to introduce yourself, Michelle? Or I can do it for you.
You know what, why don't you do it for me? I'm dealing with some technicals.
Okay, so Michelle Tate here at the end of the table is our executive assistant, and she will be managing the meeting, both the online portion, or I should say especially the online portion. And we appreciate her assistance with that, as we know there's always little technical snafus that come up. But of course, we have our counsel, Monica Merritt from the Department of Justice, and I'm not sure if Aaron is joining us today. Aaron Donald will be in the seat at times as well.
The one other thing I want to mention before we turn it over to the director for the director's report is that we do have a time certain for agenda item B, which is a consultation item. So that will be at 10 a.m. and we may move other things around on the agenda. Go ahead.
Thank you. And then when we get to other business, I may mention a few things about, assuming it's after my 9 a.m. meeting, I may mention a few things if I learn anything at that meeting as well. So we'll start with an expenditure report from Deputy Director Shannon Hearn. Oh, there she is.
Without your foot booth.
That's great. Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Zarnowitz, members of the division, Director Melcher. For the record, Shannon Hearn, Director of Administration. In your commission packet, you will see that you have the financial report for the 21-23 biennium and for the month of November 30th. We are seeing an increase in injection in the federal fund. And you're going to hear that in much greater detail here under the director's report in a minute. So we're seeing an increase in federal fund, but we're also seeing that we're not spending other fund and general fund quite as fast as we anticipated during the biennium. We have spending plans in place to ensure that by the end of the biennium, those funds are spent. But overall, expenditures are expected to land well within our limitation amounts. At the conclusion of November 2022, ODFW's unrestricted cash balance was $60.7 million, and our restricted cash came in at $48.3 million, which means our total ending balance was $109 million. This is a $6.5 million decrease from the prior month. That, again, is an expected thing that we see in the volatility of our ending balance due to money going out and then a slowdown in product sales towards the end of the year. November is consistently the slowest month of the year for selling licensed products. So we anticipate with December and January, we'll see that trend. And it might be as early as next report out that we'll see this trend reverse. I put in a note about the 23-25 budget development. Again, we are still waiting for a governor's recommended budget, anticipating that to come on or by February 1st. We will, at the February commission, February 17th, come prepared to summarize what's in that governor's recommended budget. And then I put in a note about audit updates. As our auditor stated, I had to dig deep for these ones. We have not met since the last time I reported. We will meet again in March. The latest news was that our internal auditor has been invited to sit on an audit committee.
Somebody has their mic on.
Our internal auditor has been invited to sit on the audit committee for the Oregon Department of Energy Management. This is a common practice. We ourselves on our audit committee have the chief executive auditor from the Department of Revenue on our committee. I listed the members there as well. Commissioner Spellbrink sits with us. Again, very grateful to have him there. We also have our 2 deputy directors, our East and West manager, our ASD administrator, and then our deputy administrator from ISD, and she acts as our chair. So big thank you to her for that. And that concludes the financial reports. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I do have one question, Jan. The federal funds that have been coming in at a fairly healthy rate, do those replace any of our other funds or let us hold those back for evening out when other funds might decrease?
Good question, thank you, Chair Wall. I looked at the expenditure lists that we've had, that we've applied for, and the vast majority are project specific. So it's bringing in federal funds to do, you'll hear a lot about these projects, but say a fish screening project. And so our staff are working on their personal service, and it might be used as match, but it's not giving money back. And the bulk of the money is going to get the work done on a project base. There is a few exceptions to that, like the Good Neighbor Authority, where we are required to do some match. So really, in the end of the day, there might be a small savings in a few projects, but majority of this is project based. And so we're not seeing savings in other projects.
Thank you.
Yep.
One other question that looks like.
So we don't know what the new governor's recommended budget is. In February, we'll probably know that, correct?
Correct.
So would you be able to report in February what the difference is between what we submitted to the previous governor and this governor, about what the differences are at the February meeting in your report?
Absolutely. Chair Wall, Commissioner Lenhart. We'll give you an accounting of what's in there, but I hear you specifically asked to say what wasn't in there from the agency request.
Difference
We can summarize it
between
that
what
way.
we approved as or recommended as a commission in the department and what the new governor's.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Good note. Yep.
We don't have a card, thank you, so I guess we'll use the original pointer. Thank you, Chair Wall. Thank you, Shannon. And related to Commissioner Rapport's question, in February, will you give us a clue? I sort of remember, because I was on the budget committee, like, this thing goes to the legislature, and then it comes back to us, and then it goes to us, and it's this whole long thing that I guess about August we'll get something, like, or will you tell us all of that when we talk about things in February?
Yeah, another good note, Chair Wall, Commissioner King. I will, if you want me to, I will lay out again the process, but just really quickly, the governor's recommended budget will go to the legislature. We'll have 6 months that the legislature will look at, what they're hearing from stakeholders, what they're hearing as priorities, and then they'll look at that governor's recommended budget, and they will come out with a legislatively approved budget. The other thing that they're going to look at is the February and the June revenue forecast and how much money we have in general fund and stuff. So we don't anticipate that we'll see our budget bill pass that actually tells us about our budget right up until the very end of session, which I think is June 27th. So about that time is when we'll see it. It does take some time once we get that lengthy budget bill for us and the budget program to kind of disseminate what's in, what's out. But before August, we'll have that. We can get that information to you, or we can do a report out in August, which we typically do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Walton. I would just add that when the governor's budget is released, that becomes our budget. And so we will be advocating only for what's in the governor's budget. We don't advocate outside of what the governor's requested budget is. Certainly our constituents and our customers and others they're free to advocate for whatever they want, but we are not free to advocate for whatever we want. So just wanted to refresh that point. Thank you. Then we'll go to our standing adapting to climate and ocean change report. And Karen Braby, there she is. Karen Braby is here. Dr. Braby will give you an update and discussion of all the offshore wind energy activity that's going on now, specific to Oregon. Of course, it's going on around the country, but her report will be specific to our ocean. Karen?
Thank you and good morning. Happy to be here. For the record, my name's Karen Braby. I'm the Marine Resources Program Manager, and I am here to talk about the climate and ocean change policy update as part of the director's report with a focus on offshore wind. And I start my presentation this morning with this image just to kind of set the stage of what we're talking about when we're talking about offshore wind on the West Coast. Pictured here is a floating offshore wind platform.
It's bubbles, doctor.
Oh.
They're floating.
Here before you is a turbine, rainbow colors. Here we go. I'm looking at it here on the laptop. So here depicted now is a floating offshore wind turbine pictured next to a scale of the White House. Right. So this is a scale both in terms of energy generation and benefit, as well as the size that we are not accustomed to, even though we have a lot of turbines installed on land. We're talking about something very different offshore. And that gives us both promise as well as uncertainty about how this is going to be implemented and what we are challenged with. Next slide, please. So the agency has a long history at this point in working with responsible renewable energy development. And I'm pausing here. This is an older slide, which is fine. And I will just run with a modified presentation here. Responsible renewable energy development has been a topic of a lot of conversation within the agency, trying to identify ways that we are helping to facilitate the development that we so desperately need as we're facing an unprecedented climate crisis. We embrace this climate crisis and need to have bold actions to address it. Part of that is responsible renewable energy. So how do we do that in a way that gives us benefit and doesn't give us unacceptable trade-offs in terms of impacts to fish and wildlife and other resources that we hold dear? Central to this philosophy is trying to plan our developments in a way that avoid impacts first, minimize those impacts if we can't avoid them, and if there are impacts, mitigate those impacts as we can. We have policy within the agency to support our exploration of how to do this, but there's a lot that needs to be identified as we understand what the development actually is, and then understand how it's going to work for us. The picture to the right is an early picture from the 1930s of some of the first hydroelectric dam developments. And I bring this into the discussion simply to say that hydroelectric dams have given us so much benefit from electricity generation. They've also created a lot of conflict, and we are in the process of walking back some of our hydroelectric dams in places where there were unacceptable trade-offs for having that dam in place that have led to species endangerments, community unacceptable impacts, and so on. So this is a situation, again, where we need to move forward thoughtfully and with full intention and embrace the benefits and try and avoid, minimize, and mitigate the impacts. Go slowly, not quickly, do it well, not quickly. Next slide, please. So this is not just happening off the coast of Oregon, as Director Melcher mentioned. This is happening nationally and globally. This map is even outdated. October 2021 is like an eternity ago in the rapid pace of development of offshore wind. Thank you. So here I'm highlighting 3 different areas of interest. One is the New York Bight that quite famously in early 2022 went to a lease auction for about 700 square miles of offshore territory. An auction went for $4.6 billion. And that gives those winning or successful developers the right to assess those lease auction areas further for their particular technology, their particular intent in using that area, and proposing to the federal regulatory agency, which is the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, how they're going to use that area for further approval process. So $4.6 billion, 700 square miles, simply for the right to assess in a proprietary way further those lease auction areas. So there's a lot of money that is on the table that is being committed at an early stage before we're actually installing these turbines. So that's one point. The other point is that on the West Coast, we already have a lease auction that has happened in California. It just happened in December. And for a similar amount of ocean territory, the lease auction raised about $750 million in revenue. This goes to the federal treasury, and it is an indication of the value to the developers. Is this valuable territory? And you'll note the discrepancy between the New York Bight and the California auction, even though the territory is quite similar. And I'll get back to that. Oregon, we don't know what's going to happen because that lease auction isn't going to happen until early next year. So just know there's a lot of these processes happening concurrently all over the US. Next slide, please. So there's 2 different categories of technology, 2 buckets, if you will. One is fixed rigid turbines, more analogous to what we see on land. The turbine blades are spinning around a fixed pole that's attached to the benthos. That can happen in the ocean, obviously, with an extension from the ocean surface down to the ocean bottom. But what we're expecting in Oregon is a floating offshore technology where you have some kind of floating platform or structure at the surface of the ocean and an anchoring system that leads to multiple points of anchor on the ocean bottom. So lines and some kind of rigid anchor just at the bottom. And this floating technology is more appropriate for deeper depths and areas where the slope is more steep. That is Oregon and is not the east coast of the US, at least in close range to the coast. So what we see on the East Coast and in Europe is this rigid construction, and in the West Coast, we are anticipating floating installations. Floating offshore wind is much more experimental and nascent in development. While we have hundreds and hundreds of turbines in the ocean that are in rigid installation structure, we only have a couple dozen floating offshore wind platforms that are in the ocean currently. And they are working, and they are still nascent. And the ability for us to really mount a serious installation of those is still in the development phase. So globally, a couple dozen floating offshore platforms versus hundreds and hundreds of rigid fixed structures. Next slide. So here is the territory of the US. Blue is what's anticipated to be appropriate for floating structures, and yellow or orange, the fixed structures. And so what we have in the water so far in the US is in that orange range. All of the area that is being considered actively for leasing right now is inside of 1,300 meters, although there is a call for information and exploration of how much deeper these installations can go. I think the title of this slide is important to note, that we are under both presidential executive order for targets for development of offshore wind. President Biden has set a 30 gigawatt target for offshore wind development by 2030. But within the state, we have targets as well. not necessarily for offshore wind, but for achieving clean energy targets. So our target currently is 100% clean energy by 2040. And so offshore wind is a part of that. And even without a specific gigawatt target, that is a serious stated policy goal for the state. Next slide, please. So looking at the areas off the coast of the West Coast, and of course, most importantly for Oregon for our discussion this morning, we have a number of areas that are actively being considered. For Oregon, we have 2 call areas that are on the South Coast where the wind resource is richest, meaning there is the most wind down there, and anybody who travels there knows that this is true. And we have 2 areas, one off the coast of Coos Bay, one off the coast of Brookings. But we also have active areas that were just leased in California. Both Oregon and California have what's called a BOEM/state task force to consider and plan for wind energy development. That is not the case for Washington. They have not hosted a task force in that state. However, they are subject to unsolicited lease requests outside of the planning process that a task force provides. And they are now considering at least 2 unsolicited lease requests there that will likely go to a competitive lease process, just like we have in Oregon and California. So the point here is that all of the West Coast states are engaged. We're all at a slightly different stage of the process and doing slightly different things, but we're talking to each other and learning lessons as we go across this space. Next slide. So now I'm going to give you a couple of slides on the potential concerns, uncertainties, impacts that we are anticipating from this development. Just like any development, offshore wind has benefits, but does have concerns. So fisheries access and impacts is at very much high on our list of concerns due to the fact that Oregon's ocean is a very busy place. And here on the left-hand panel, you can see a heat map where orange is high intensity fishing grounds, and the cooler colors in blue, green are lower intensity fishing grounds. This is for one sector, the groundfish bottom trawl sector. And if you were to layer on all of the commercial fisheries sectors onto these call areas, you would see that there is not a single spot on this map in the call areas that is not utilized by a fishery. So the ocean is busy. There will be impact, that is certain, if there is displacement of fisheries from areas. But our task now is to understand what those impacts are and to minimize those impacts and try to receive both benefits from any development and keep our fisheries whole and functioning and productive. We're very proud of our fisheries. They are sustainable. They are models of sustainability worldwide. That's something that's important to us as an agency, important to us as Oregonians, and something to be protective of as we usher in this era of renewable energy. Next slide. There are also ecosystem concerns that are related to, but separate from fisheries uses. They range quite a spectrum of potential challenges, including things like upwelling. You know, the capture of wind energy by definition is taking that energy away from interacting with the ocean. And our ocean is famous for upwelling and producing amazing productive biodiversity and productivity. So by interrupting that transfer of energy from the wind to the water and to the ecosystem at large, we are changing it in some way. So how is that going to affect productivity? Will there be interactions with the rigid structures of this infrastructure with protected species that we've worked hard to rebuild and to protect? Our habitats, and even our ability to assess in a scientific manner the function and status of our ocean will be interrupted by any rigid structure and farm and installation. So how are those aspects being considered as we consider these developments offshore? Next slide. It's not just concerns related to the agencies, authorities, but also how these are going to affect our communities, the ports, our infrastructure at a very core societal level. Are we ready for this? What do we need to do to prepare? Our ports need to be able to handle the level of development that will be required to support these developments at a broad scale. Our transmission system will need to be able to handle the electrons that are being funneled onshore, and they're not ready yet. There's a lot that needs to be done in order to ready these. And there are agencies in the state and many, many people who are looking at these concerns and challenges to try and resolve those. At the forefront, of course, is our sister agency, the Oregon Department of Energy. But there are many agencies and many industry and public members who are looking at this now. Next slide. So going back to ODFW's role, specifically, what are we doing in this? There's a lot that I've shared with you. There's much more that I could share. I'm trying to keep this brief, just give you a flavor of what's going on. Know that there are a lot of staff at ODFW who are involved in this and are responding to this to improve the outcomes for Oregon. Our stewardship roles really center around data provision. It's what we know about the resources, what we know about the fisheries, and making sure those are part of the decision-making process, with BOEM being central in that decision-making process. We are facilitating the voices of the public, our stakeholders, and engaging in that process, which can be confusing and intimidating at times, and trying to bridge that gap for Oregonians. And we are serving as key advisors to sister agencies in the state and federal systems, and doing that often. Challenges for these fulfilling these stewardship roles are the same types of challenges you hear about on most issues. We don't have enough information, so we're trying to fill data gaps. We're trying to build information where we can. There is also a gap in the planning strategy for how the state really is going to make this renewable energy future work as a whole system. We're working on parts of it, but that planning strategy for a holistic approach is something that has been identified by the Oregon Department of Energy. That's something that our agency welcomes. If that is something that we can develop as a state, would benefit us in that decision-making process in the long term. And then, of course, staffing capacity across the enterprise. I am taking the liberty of speaking for the enterprise. Every agency that I have worked with has been challenged in meeting the demand, the pace of this. And you've heard this before related to other development processes. Things happen quickly. We need to respond quickly. And it takes a lot of effort and a lot of people to make the best outcome possible. Next slide. My last is simply to say that 2023 will be busy. We are working on filling some of those information gaps with BOEM and our other agency partners. There will be establishment of wind energy areas, which you can consider as a winnowing down from the call areas that exist off Coos Bay and Brookings. And then identification of lease areas either late this year or early next year, and an auction for those areas early in 2024. So that is my report for you. And I'll just reflect that as part of the Climate and Ocean Change report to you, both the transformation of our energy reliance onto renewable energy, as well as fish and wildlife and habitat impacts, are central to our challenge as an agency and your challenge as a commission. And I thank you for your time and welcome any comments or questions.
Commissioner Khalil and then Commissioner King.
Thank you. The timing of this is very funny for me because in my day job at the New England Aquarium, we've been talking about offshore wind like incessantly for the last couple months in preparation for a massive NSF proposal. So ringing all these bells. And in that project, we've been talking about workforce development and engaging coastal communities in workforce development and STEM education. And I'm wondering if those conversations have happened yet in the Oregon sphere, and if so, what you've talked about.
Thank you, Chair Wall and Commissioner Khalil. Great question. And I think the answer is yes. And the East Coast is at such a more advanced stage of the process that I think those discussions are much more developed. At this stage, what I hear and what I have been part of is just this concern: where are the jobs going to be lost? Where are the jobs going to be gained? Will there be a balance between those? What skills do we already have in Oregon, or are these going to be skills that we need to import? And if so, where are those going to come from? So very high level, kind of almost philosophical approach, given that we are so early in the process, we don't know who is going to be putting installations in potentially, what those technologies look like, what skills would be required. So I think there's great understanding that we are going to gain jobs. We are going to probably lose jobs. So there's going to be transformation, but how that happens is yet to be determined and needs a lot of thinking.
I'm sure.
Yeah, great question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Wall, and thank you, Dr. Brady. And we all have our rocking our water bottles up here. I want you to know that I have my Marine Reserve. Thank you to tell us all apart. My question is, I know the presentation was brief, and we talked about the fisheries concerns. But I think I read recently that they think a humpback whale got nailed by like a turbine or something. And there's, the whole fiasco that happened with the crab pots and the whales got all the entanglements. So, I mean, are we thinking of those sorts of things as well in terms of like what we're protecting and what we're looking out for in terms of the placement? Because I guess we're trying probably to figure out where they migrate, not get in their path, those sorts of things.
Thank you, Chair Wall and Commissioner King. Yes, we are thinking about those, and those responsibilities rest with us as an agency, as well as our federal partners, thinking about each resource and what those potential interactions with these installations would be, and if that's a negative one or not. And for some of our protected species, seabirds and marine mammals in particular, just like on land, our presumed primary interaction between these installations and seabirds is through the turbines, and impact and mortality from that interaction. With whales, large marine mammals, the interaction, it could be a lot of things, but maybe high on our list, at least, is interaction with noise. These platforms are quite loud. The development of those, the building of those is loud, but then the operation is loud as well. And how is that going to interact and affect species that use sound to navigate and communicate? And then secondary entanglement. So if something becomes entangled on the lines that attach the floating platforms to the anchors on the seabed, and then there's interaction with the things that are entangled on those lines, that could easily trap animals, including mammals, including fishes, sharks, other animals. So those are two of the impacts. There is literally a very long list of concerns, and that's intimidating, right? It's a very long list, and we're working through those concerns to see which ones are most likely and how to be prepared to have discussions on putting in mitigation measures for those. Again, I'll just say that the state is very much involved in that discussion, and part of that responsibility rests with BOEM to put that into the lease agreements and do that in conjunction with their sister agency, NOAA, that has a jurisdiction over marine mammals in particular, which was the focus of your question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. I have a couple questions. Important and timely report, it seems. So thank you for the report. These climate change, ocean change issues just seem to be that way. The first question I have is, in the last round, when we looked at wind energy off the Oregon coast, one of the things that happened, at least in several of the places, is that Pacific Ocean is different than the Atlantic Ocean, and it's too rough or too windy, and we love our wind for the upwelling and other things. Is that no longer an issue, or is there still this huge difference and Pacific may not be appropriate in all areas or suitable in all areas, I should say?
Thank you, Chair Wall, for the question. As a Fish and Wildlife Agency, of course, we don't have the engineering expertise on what is feasible. And I think BOEM, as the leasing agency for the federal government, is relying on developers to know their technology and bid and engage in a leasing process where they think their technology will succeed. My understanding as almost an outsider to that discussion is that that will be a serious discussion between the federal entity and the developer. And there are national labs that are focused on understanding that capability of technology and where the weak points are and where they aren't. So that discussion is happening. I cannot assure you that it's ready or not. I don't know. I don't have that expertise, but the developers are anxious to be involved and they want to bid on these lease auction areas. That's evident from the California lease auction that happened last month. And so they have confidence on the order of $750 million that their technology is ready. Otherwise, they wouldn't have put that money on the line.
Thank you. My main question, thanks. The main question I have is the last thing any of us are looking for is to get to walk this back a decade out or 2 decades out. So can you talk about, and I know that there's never going to be enough staff to have the data that we need, but it seemed like you were talking about we're really tight on how much resource we have across the enterprise, but for us specifically. So what's the priority to have that information before we are in the position of making these decisions so that we aren't walking these things back and trying to put our fisheries or our whale routes back together after the fact?
Thank you, Chair Wall. I think that I have some thoughts about that, but the prioritization of what information has to be on the table before a decision gets made is certainly in the hands of the state, the governor of the state, the directors and commissions of the state to some degree, but really it's with the federal agencies under whose authority this rests. And so that is in the hands of the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And there are procedures and expectations that are in place now to evaluate the readiness on every level, whether it's fisheries impacts, ecosystem impacts, or port readiness, or all of that. There is inventory happening of where we are on each topic and whether we're ready or not. But I think that the key message is that we need to move forward at a steady pace when the time is right. And that is at the decision of BOEM. Now, to caveat that a little bit, I think that there is very much interest in the states being active and collaborative partners. We have had a really rich relationship with BOEM over the Oregon BOEM task force discussions. And there have been key places and times when BOEM has chosen to do things differently, which essentially has led to a slowdown of the pace in order to develop information in key areas. So they have gone outside of their mandated public process to hold hearings, take public comment, and to work with us on filling some data gaps. And that is welcome and appreciated by the state that they are willing to take that path.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Looks like we have 3 more questions and then we'll wrap up. So Commissioner Lampard, Vice Chair Zarnowitz, and then Commissioner Spelberg.
Okay, I'll be quick. Karen, I want to switch subjects. I want to give you some kudos. You have been at the head of the pin with this commercial crabbing season and the go, no go on that. And I've seen some of the things that have been going around about it. And I just want to, to try to balance that with, are the crabs full, the dometic acid situation and economic, it's a tough decision. And I just want to recognize you publicly for your professionalism and your work in working through some really tough biologically, social, and political issues to where we are today. So I just don't want you to get away with not being recognized publicly for your efforts in helping to achieve that. So I know it's tough, and I think this commission recognizes you have a tough job to do, but I want to just recognize your professionalism. So thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair. I have several questions. Would the fisheries be allowed to work within these areas? So, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Wall and Commissioner Zarnowitz. That's the billion-dollar question. And our presumption moving forward is that most fisheries activity will be excluded because of the potential danger of interaction with the platform, with interaction with the anchor lines, and that both for navigational safety for the individuals on a vessel, as well as for the safety of the platform and installation, that would need to be separated. On the East Coast, they are having discussions about allowing some fisheries to have access, hook and line, small vessels, but discussions about how close they can get to a platform and be safe has to occur. And of course, they're working with the rigid installation where it's a much smaller footprint of the below surface infrastructure than we would have on the West Coast, which would have a fairly broad scope with the scope of those anchor lines in most likelihood. So when we're moving forward, we are assuming that the footprint of a wind farm offshore is going to be an exclusion zone, but that's yet to be fully determined.
Okay. The other thing is, I didn't see an electrical cable going down on that slide, so I assume something goes straight down from the turbine.
Yes, thank you, Chair Wall and Vice Chair Zarnowitz. Yes, that is the case. So you can think of, an individual turbine, having its infrastructure being daisy chained to other turbines next to it, coming together in some kind of system where it's then funneled into a cable that runs to shore. And so there's a lot of infrastructure below the water. Presumably, lots of assumptions going into this, it would be in the benthos dug into the substrate, just like a fiber optic cable is dug into the substrate currently. And substations could be at the surface or in the water column or at the bottom, I suppose, depending. The installations I've seen have been kind of floating platforms at the surface that are the substations that bring in all of that energy from multiple turbines, and then it goes to the bottom and to shore.
So there's a significant electrical field in this water in this entire area, which would be significant to fish and wildlife.
Yes.
I assume that the floating generators have been pretty much eliminated. It seems like everybody's going for these windmills. So I know that there was problems with those as well. And you've already pretty much addressed that you're looking at all areas, all the birds and everything, but I could just see, I hope all the agencies are, that there's significant cumulative effects with these if the wind stops, so all the production is reduced, and electrical fields and on and on and on.
kind of overwhelming. So I congratulate you on your work, and I know you say there's not enough people to work on it, but it sounds like it's a good team effort, not only in the department, but with the federal agencies too, because NOAA and Fish and Wildlife Service, they can all be good partners in this, and other agencies. So thank you for your work on it for sure. It's pretty scary though.
Yeah. Thank you. Commissioner Spellbrink and then Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde.
Thanks, Chair Wall. Hi, Karin. Maybe if you're around the break, we can talk about some of the crab stuff anyway, but imagine I've been getting a few calls too. Anyway, but more of a comment I had, I've been a member of the FINE group in Newport, which is fishermen involved in natural energy. And since its inception, and I can't remember how many years ago that was, we've kind of went through the wave energy stuff, and now it's kind of switched to wind. But just another comment is that, I survived 40 years on the ocean with trying not to be there in certain conditions, what we see in the wintertime here. And I guess color me a little skeptical yet when you see, 80 knot winds and 30 to 40 foot seas, that anything surviving out there. Just a comment.
Yeah. Thank you. Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde.
Thank you. Oh, turn on here. Thank you, Dr. Braby, for your presentation. We always love having your presentations. Just a general kind of a NIMBY comment from me, I think. Not in my backyard, Oregon, with all these things that are going to disrupt fish and wildlife. I realize that's an irresponsible, non-productive way of working through these issues, but I've spent the last 20 years backing us out of dams on the Klamath River. And even though those dams had reached a point where they weren't creating an incredible amount of energy, the community impact of reversing that decision has been painful. I like to think about Oregon in the sense of the way we are doing like our OCamp mapping, for all, big migrations of all of these fish and wildlife that we're trying to take care of. And I'm just concerned about whether or not we're doing a good enough job on the PR front in Oregon to say, yes, look what happens in the ocean, look what happens. You see the mule deer here, but did you know they're also over here, and all those connections that we're making. And so I have a lot of fear, because although I really respect and understand climate change and the need for renewable energy and different energy, I'm very concerned, kind of, I think what Chair Wall was trying to say, that 20 years from now, we'll look back and we'll say, we got this huge influx of money to go renewable, to go green, and we cluttered up Oregon with a lot of infrastructure that did some damage, kind of like those dams did damage, right? When we thought that was the best idea. So I know I can't be a NIMBY, but I want to be, right? Do we have a vision of our precious Oregon and what we want it to look like, right? And are we communicating that vision amongst ourselves and across the landscape? So that's no solution, just complaining.
That's more than complaining, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Karin, I think we have come to the end of the questions. Thank you. We'll definitely be looking for updates on this as this moves forward. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Tavia, do you want to introduce the next?
Thank you, Karin.
If you want me to. Okay, I'm fine with that. The next item is federal infrastructure funding update, and we have 4 people listed. It looks like Deputy Debbie Colbert and Andrea. And actually, I think what I'll do is have you introduce everybody and how you're going to do this one.
Okay.
And we're missing one person, so.
Jeff Yankee should be joining us virtually.
Okay.
So I don't know, Michelle, if we've got Jeff.
We do have Jeff.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. I am Debbie Colbert. I don't know, Davia's acting deputy director for Fish and Wildlife Programs, and I'm like, I guess I'm the not acting, like I don't know what to call myself right now.
It's sort of like our districts. We don't know where we are.
We'll just go with you. Okay. So I actually will turn to kind of our panelists and let them introduce themselves, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Chair Wall.
Good morning, Chair Wall, Commissioners, Deputy Director Palmieri. For the record, I'm Andrea Hansen. I am the Acting Conservation Policy Coordinator in the Director's Office.
Good morning, Chair Wall. My name is Sarah Evans-Peters. I am the Assistant U.S. Coordinator for Pacific Birds Habitat Joint Venture.
Good morning, Chair Wall.
Mic check for Jeff Yankee.
Can y'all hear me?
Jeff, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Zarnowitz, members of the commission. For the record, I'm Jeff Yankee, District Manager for the Grand Ronde Watershed here at Enterprise.
Yeah, I can see it going on and off mute, so he's clearly doing something.
There's
quite a delay today also.
Okay.
I was just unmuted. Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Zarnowitz, members of the commission. For the record, I'm Jeff Yankee.
We'll
District
keep working
Manager
on that. But in the meantime, I'll introduce Jeff. Jeff Yankee is our Grand Ronde Watershed District Manager, and he is actually going to talk to you about a little bit of the work that we've been doing in that area later in the slides. In your survey that we did with you last summer about some of the topics that you were interested in, several of you flagged that you'd like to hear how things have gone with our federal infrastructure request. So that's why we're here today, to just share a little bit about how things have gone. It's just been over a year. And then also talk to you a little bit about where we're heading next. Just as a quick reminder, do I advance the slides? So before I hand it off to Andrea, just as a quick reminder, when the IIJA, BIL, alphabet soup of infrastructure dollars hit the streets last November, we really quickly, stood up our plan of attack for those dollars. We recognized that with $11 billion available to invest in ecosystems over 5 years, that we were going to have to be really strategic about how we went after them, because none of those dollars really came with any staff capacity. So we had 3 strategies as we went forward. First, we identified some focal areas from our perspective where we said, these are areas that we think that there's already some capacity in terms of local readiness, that there were places where you could really in 5 years move the dial and see it move in 5 years. The second strategy that we had is, we might focus our effort in these focal areas, but how do we serve as kind of matchmakers to our many, many partners across the state? I mean, the amount of information that has been flowing over this year in terms of what was going to be available, who was eligible to apply, how much, when, the timelines were short. And so we said, if we are already wading through that for ourselves, why don't we do that as a service for others? Because across the board, our number one goal was to try to get as many of these dollars in Oregon. And we didn't care who got them, as long as they were going to great things on the ground. Our third strategy was also to look for opportunities to influence the federal agencies. All of this money landed on them virtually overnight, and they had to come up with spend plans, criteria, priorities. And so we have been working at all levels, from the director to policy staff, to really see how much we could influence those decisions before they even decided how they were going to spend the money. I think, spoiler alert, I think that it's been a really big success for Oregon. And we're going to share some of those examples. But that has really been a product of the hard work that Andrea Hansen has done, leading it for the director's office, Craig Smith in our fish division. And then each one of these focal areas that you see, we have a team of folks that can get this done in kind of an all hands on deck effort. So we just want to thank the staff for all their work. And then I can hand it over to Andrea.
Jump in while it's quiet.
No, because it's got it.
Okay, so I'm really excited to talk to you guys today. We're very successful.
introduction, and then we'll go right to Andrea Hansen.
Just testing. Everybody can hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chairs Arnowitz, members of the commission. For the record, I'm Jeff Yankee, District Manager for the Grand Ronde Watershed here in Enterprise.
All right, so I'll start again about being very excited. Michelle turned mine up. Hello? Michelle, you did turn mine up. Is it on now? Hello? That's how excited I am about how well ODFW and Oregon did in 2022 for IIJA funding. The agency's quick response and hard work really paid off. Each focal team found the most advantageous role they could play to reach the natural resources goals identified for each focal area. And we made wonderful advances in securing funds for Oregon, building partnerships and galvanizing movement around our focal areas, and becoming an IIJA information hub. Oregon received $2.1 billion, and that was mostly in transportation-related projects, but energy, environment, and climate did receive $252 million in 2022. Over the past year, ODFW has submitted or collaborated on more than 41 IIJA grant projects, requesting roughly $90 million. And we were successful in being awarded more than $32 million, with a lot of applications still pending, and look very good for the outlook. To implement 5 projects across the state. ODFW collaborated with the Klamath-Siskiyou Oak Network on the grant application to conserve and restore oak habitats in Southern Oregon. And you'll hear from Sarah Evans-Peters today about that amazing effort. ODFW also partnered with the Nez Perce Tribe and many partners on a $5 million grant to restore sockeye salmon in Wallowa Lake. And you'll hear Jeff Yankee presenting about that incredible project. So just to put this into perspective, Oregon received 14% of the 91 million total awards allocated, and that's huge. And not that it was a competition, but Oregon received more funds than any other state by a substantial amount. Oregon had the greatest number of projects awarded, and we had the highest award amount for a single project, which was the Nez Perce Tribe application in the Wallowa. So some other examples of successful grants that had close collaboration with ODFW and partners, and it really reflected the diversity of the focus and locations across the state, included NOAA's Restoring Fish Passage Through Barrier Removal grants for $11 million, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation's National Coast Resiliency Fund, which provided $3 million to restore wetlands to reduce flooding and improve water quality in the 10 Mile Lakes watershed, and the Bureau of Reclamation's Environmental Water Restoration Program, which provided $3 million for infrastructure modernization, fish passage, and in-stream and habitat restoration in the Rogue. So ODSW staff have been instrumental in building partnerships, engaging stakeholders, providing support, leveraging resources, and galvanizing movement around the agency's IIJA focal areas. So creating the synergy around these focal areas and stimulating energy and focus on specific natural resource needs has been one of the biggest accomplishments of our focal teams. And it's one of the reasons why Oregon has been so successful in IIJA this year. As mentioned previously, each focal team took a different role in their efforts, depending on the greatest need of the particular natural resource issue. So for example, the Rogue Watershed Resiliency Focal Area was an excellent example of a diverse group of entities with differing interests and perspectives coming together to tackle the issue of water quality and quantity, particularly in the face of changing climate and growing population. So ODFW staff convened the Rogue Watershed Resiliency Initiative as a result of being identified as a focal area for IIJA funds. So watershed councils, NGOs, county governments, and the Medford Water Commission have been active participants in the group and have put substantial effort into identifying overlapping priorities and combining efforts to leverage their varying areas of expertise and resources to improve their chances of success in bringing IIJA funds into the road watershed. So they've worked on collaborating to develop a pipeline of projects, identifying partner leads, match sources, and other support of partners to strengthen their projects. And projects will include modernizing water management systems, upgrading infrastructure to promote fish passage, and improvements to in-stream habitat. The Klamath focal area is a little different since this is an existing partnership with a large number of interested parties invested in the Klamath Basin with a long history of unfunded priorities and agreements, which at times have been contentious. So the Klamath focal team's efforts have been focused on engaging with partners and advancing conservation priorities to pursue or implement IIJA funding. The IIJA earmarked $162 million for Oregon and California in the Klamath Basin. Oregon received $8.7 million this year. ODFW staff have been assisting the partnership with sort of narrowing down the scope of projects for IIJA funding and being more strategic in their investments, which has seen some great successes already. The IIJA has helped fund habitat improvements in the Williamson River, Upper Sprague, and Lower Klamath, along with some fish research funds. And in 2023, the focal team will continue to work to advance these priorities and are very optimistic that they're going to have a lot more movement in 2023. So OC Coho have an existing strong consortium of partners focused on protecting and restoring freshwater and estuarine habitats. So the OC Coho focal team has been coordinating closely with partners to apply for and implement IIJA funds using priorities identified in the OC Coho Conservation Plan and Regional Strategic Action Plans. The focal team was able to take advantage of the great collaborative effort already put into prioritization and planning and jump right into applications and project implementation. They've been successful in acquiring funds for roughly 12 culvert replacements, 12 barrier removals, and 3 large these large projects. So Jeff, why don't you take it next?
Great. So Chair Wall, Vice Chair Charnowitz, member of the commission, the Wallowa IIJA focal area includes a diverse suite of goals. Primarily, Wallowa Lake Dam is over 100 years old and is currently listed as high hazard, which means failure would likely result in the loss of life, in addition to catastrophic property loss and damage in downstream communities. We should also consider the substantial loss of high-value fish and wildlife habitat in the Wallowa River Valley. And as a result of the high hazard designation, the dam is currently limited to storing just 70% of the water rights held by the Wallowa Lake Irrigation District. Rehabilitating the dam will allow the district to reclaim approximately 12,000 acre feet of stored water, of which up to 5,000 acre feet has already been committed to in-stream purposes through an MOA with the district. And with this, reclaiming storage both helps our agricultural community and fish and wildlife habitat become more climate resilient in the Wallowa Valley. Wallowa Lake Dam is also listed as a high priority in ODFW's fish passage priority list, having been constructed without fish passage or screening. Rehabilitation will bring the structure into compliance with current Oregon fish passage statutes with both upstream passage and downstream screening. And restoring fish passage also supports the long-standing goal to reintroduce sockeye salmon to the Wallowa Basin, establishing important ecological processes, cultural connections, recreational fisheries, and economical opportunities. Next slide. Of course, accomplishing all these goals truly takes a village. Therefore, a strong partnership is foundational to this focal area. I can't think of a better visual representation of this partnership than the photo that you see in the slide there, which was taken when former Governor Brown visited Wallowa Lake Dam this past fall. Governor Brown was the catalyst for this effort as she proposed funding the rehabilitation of the dam with state lottery funds, both during the 1921 and 21-23 biennium. The Wallowa Lake Irrigation District are owners and operators of Wallowa Lake Dam, and we recognize that Wallowa Lake is the ancestral home to the Wallowa band of the Nimipu, or the Nez Perce tribe, and they are also recognized fishery co-managers in the Grand Ronde Basin, along with the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. Oregon Water Resources Department have played an enormous role in developing the Wallowa Lake MOA and continue to provide important technical assistance. And the focal area is both an external and internal collaboration for ODFW staff, having received substantial contributions from various headquarters and regional programs. ODFW staff roles have included informing partners of funding opportunities, directly applying for funds, providing engineering and design support, and project implementation. Next slide. The core project within this entire focal area is the dam itself and the rehabilitation for structural safety, storage reclamation goals, and in addition to providing fish passage. But the investment made into the structural aspect of the project allows this partnership to use these funds as match to leverage IIJA funds for more comprehensive and system-wide improvements. For example, the main project will extend downstream of the dam and can include consolidating irrigation ditches, making fish screening most effective and economically efficient. Ditch consolidation also allows current upstream barriers to be removed at points of diversion, and the middle photo there in the slide kind of shows one of those downstream of the dam. And finally, the project will provide upstream passage and screening at the consolidated ditch near the town of Joseph, which is a major diversion that is currently the upstream limit for migratory fish species and is currently unscreened. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the completion of the dam will trigger the implementation of the Wallowa Lake MOA, which includes up to 5,000 acre feet of stored water that will be fully protected for in-stream purposes. And with those flows, the agreement gives the partners the ability to shape the release of those flows on an annual basis, maximizing benefit to fisheries and habitat. Next slide. So while facing the challenge of a COVID-19 pandemic and rapid inflation, the partners have accomplished an incredible amount of fundraising over the past 2 years. Using the initial investment from former Governor Brown and the Oregon legislature as a foundation, the partners have secured approximately $30 million towards the current estimated project cost of $38 million. To date, over 75% of the funding for this project has been secured. And as you can see, the secured funds represent a diverse array of sources from state and federal programs. But as it pertains to IIJA, I'm proud to point out that the Nez Perce and Umatilla tribes were co-applicants on a successful America the Beautiful Challenge grant that secured $5 million towards completing the Wallowa Lake Dam project. Next slide. And this also illustrates how the partners intend to utilize opportunities through various IIJA programs to secure the remaining $8 million to complete this part of the focal area. For example, partners are currently exploring the opportunity of applying to the Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart program to fund aspects of ditch consolidation downstream of the dam and other water system efficiencies. Partners will also look into applying to the Pacific Coastal Salmon Recovery Program this spring to complete fish passage and screening improvements at the consolidated ditch there in Joseph. Next slide. But as I mentioned earlier, the focal area is not just limited to Wallowa Lake Dam itself. We recognize that in order to successfully pass fish to the dam, improvements need to be completed at downstream diversions, which are shown on the map at the right. Most of these diversions are already screened and do currently pass more robust species like steelhead and Chinook salmon, but could be improved for sockeye, bull trout, and lamprey, for example. So in addition, the partners also see an opportunity here to utilize these IIJA programs to make improvements in the entire Wallowa system that generate water savings and delivery efficiencies, such as repairing, replacing head gates, and leaking pipelines. And last slide. And with that, I'll leave you with an example of how the partnership is working together to complete these passage improvements downstream of the dam. For example, the Wilson and Dorrance diversions are fully screened, but partial upstream barriers near Joseph, Oregon, just downstream of Wallowa Lake Dam. The Nez Perce tribe are landowners on one side of the Wilson diversion and will be the applicants for both projects under the National Fish Passage Program, since tribes are not required to secure match funds. Local ODFW staff secured additional landowner support at both locations, and Salem engineering staff is completing the design and engineering at the Wilson diversion. And once funding is secured and design is complete, both entities will share construction oversight and project management. And the process in this partnership will just continue to flow downstream from there. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Debbie, Andrea, and Sarah.
Thanks, Jeff. We'll go next to Sarah.
Commissioner Wall and Commissioner members, thank you so much for having me. My name is Sarah Evans-Peters again, and I am the Assistant U.S. Coordinator for Pacific Birds Habitat Joint Venture. And for those of you that don't know joint ventures, we were created in the early 80s with the mission to protect habitat for birds using the vehicle of partnerships. And we're federally funded. We have an international management board of which we are super lucky to have Davia Palmari serving on. So we're grateful for her service and representation of ODFW. But today I'm here representing the Klamath-Siskiyou Oak Network. And big thanks to Andrea for supporting this project and to Laura Tessler for doing a lot of the heavy lifting getting this in. Next slide. So the Upper Rogue Oak Initiative was awarded $2.78 million through the America the Beautiful Act. And it will restore 800 acres of oak habitat in Southern Oregon. And the Klamath-Siskiyou Oak Network is the leaders of this. They were established in 2011, so they're over 2 decades old. They've been collaborating at a scale and at a pace that is amazing. They've restored over 6,000 acres of oak habitat, and they really embrace an all lands approach. They're very used to having large grants in which they manage through NRCS and other big chunks of money. So this was a natural fit for them. Next slide. This initiative builds on a recent award from the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board of $7 million. So it's an expansion of the geography of that initiative. This project really focuses on, again, that all lands approach. So catalyzing tribal, federal, and private landowners through collaboration, support, and capacity for oak restoration. And uses a couple of techniques: prescribed fire, reducing conifer encroachment to oaks, noxious weed abatement, and understory planting. And that is all towards the ecological outcomes of stable populations of some of our declining oak and prairie species, and also resilient ecosystems in a rural, fire-prone landscape. So you can see real quick, I'm going to walk through this map, that the gray to the bottom left is Medford. The outer red circle is this initiative, the Upper Rogue, that will focus on 800 acres of restoration. The inner black circle is the Little Butte initiative that was funded through OWEB. That will restore 2,480 adjacent acres, mostly on private and BLM land. The red in the middle is the Oban Chain, the South Oban Chain Fire. And the hash marks that kind of cross in between is another initiative through Rogue Forest Partners, which is a forest collaborative. And that will restore 450 acres of BLM and 250 acres of private, all oak. Next slide. So this partnership is very strong. We have NRCS, we have the BLM, we have the Nature Conservancy, ODFW, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Partners Program, amongst many others that are signatories on the MOU. But Lomacotsi Restoration Project, Klamath Bird Observatory, and then Pacific Birds, as well as Oregon Wildlife Foundations are really the project leads on this. And so Lomacotsi Restoration Project, if you're not familiar with them, they bring a really amazing breadth of everything to the project. So they're going to be leading the landowner engagement, project planning, and the actual restoration. They also have a tribal partnerships program, and they lead the Intertribal Ecosystem Restoration Partnership. So tribes and the intertribal crew members have supported oak restoration through the Klamath-Siskiyou now for over 2 decades. It's a very strong partnership and program. The Klamath Bird Observatory leads the coordination as well as kind of project coordination for these larger grants. They also deal with science delivery, with monitoring, and with all bird science involved in the project. And then Oregon Wildlife Foundation is one of Pacific Birds' fiscal sponsors, as well as Ducks Unlimited. And so it was a natural fit for us to work with Oregon Wildlife to be the project sponsors and to be the grant administration side of this grant with ODFW. And then just lastly, just on the larger picture, there's a lot of these oak partnerships now that are crossing the Northwest. which is amazing. So not just the Klamath-Siskiyou, but these oak partnerships have popped up all over the West Coast and now blanket Washington down to Northern California. And they're all coming together to leverage resources and share resources at a scale that is very impactful. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff and Sarah, for helping us showcase those incredible efforts. Now that we're starting a new year, we've worked to identify takeaways from 2022 and development plans for modification and enhancements to our IIJA efforts in 2023. So we plan to expand our collaborations with tribes. We'll work to expand and modify our focal areas to incorporate funding from the Inflation Reduction Act, which has a slightly different focus. And we're currently working to increase our outreach to a broader breadth of partners. So with so much preparation and effort this year in partnership building and planning, we're really poised to move forward in 2023 with a lot of applications and implementations. So I think that we were extremely successful this year. I think next year is going to be amazing. We have a lot of projects ready. We have a lot of planning ready. And so once again, I'm going to end with excitement for 2023. Thank you.
I just love that she said this year we're going to apply, for a lot. And I look at last year and honestly, 12 months of figuring out what it was even happening, organizing, partnering, applying. It's pretty amazing. So we're happy to answer any questions you have.
Looks like we have one question or a couple, and it is truly remarkable, the level of everybody wants you to do on the ground work and prioritize on the ground work, and we got to do it. It's a remarkable opportunity, and I appreciate that you jumped on it. So let's go to questions. We have Commissioner Labhart, and then we have Commissioner King, and then we'll move on to the next item.
Okay, thank you. Debbie, could you go back to that one slide where it says the 14%? I think it's like the second slide. And while you're doing that, Commissioner Hatfield Hyde had the privilege of attending the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies annual meeting. There are 16 states that are in there. And one of the questions that was asked of all these agencies, how many applications did your agency put forth for the America the Beautiful Grant Challenge? What was your funding request, and was your application successful? New Mexico, unsuccessful. Arizona, unsuccessful. Colorado Parks, went on and on. Oklahoma, unsuccessful. Oregon was successful. America the Beautiful Challenge grant, and all the other states gave us the stink eye pretty bad about what did you guys do? And so I just want to say what we did was people like you behind the scenes, and I'm sure you're going to give credit to others, but you did your homework, it passed, and we got a very successful grant. So thank you for all your work that you did. And then also I'd just like to continue to lobby. The Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board is a significant partner with us to continue to go after grants. And I know Jeff is very familiar with the OWEB board. We did a tour of Wallowa Lake Dam, but continue to seek out funding from them. They have a lot of money and they do really good work, and they want to be a partner with projects like you just talked about here. So continue to go after them. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner King.
Thank you, Chair Wall. Thank you for your presentation. Congratulations on all your successes. My question is all the excitement you're talking about moving forward as is in the alphabet soup. Are we talking about more IIJA or are we talking about IRA? Because I know I asked you for a report of what IRA is and what are we doing, and it was all vague and we were very confused. Like, have we gotten some clarity and what are we doing moving forward?
Chair Wall, Commissioner King, that's a great question. The main funding sources for the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, are focused more natural resources related, are more agricultural, conservation with agricultural lands. So that's the area that we can expand a little bit more and either develop new focal teams to sort of focus on those opportunities or modify our existing ones to incorporate more of the agricultural conservation focus. The IRA funds are still being worked through in the federal agencies. They're still trying to plan whether they're just going to combine them with IIJA funding or develop new funding programs. They are starting to trickle in some webinars to start sharing with partners what their plans are for the IRA funding. But other than NRCS, we haven't heard much, and we have not heard definitive decisions on where the funding will go or how they will allocate it across the nation.
Okay, I understand you partially, because in my day job, I do a lot of work with urban forestry, specifically talking about the canopy and heat islands and things like that. And I know a huge chunk, like to the tune of 60 billion, is going to environmental justice and projects like that, which it doesn't have to be urban forestry. I mean, environmental justice is broad. It can be rural, it can be tribes. You can just go crazy with that. So while I understand, like you're saying, some focus is on agricultural, but I'm saying another huge focus is environmental justice, like in terms of like rebuilding entire city or entire states, entire landscape focus. So are we like getting switched on and plugged into like what exactly that means? Because for me, it is still really very unclear. So I'm just wondering where you guys are.
Sure. Well, Commissioner King, yes, it's still very unclear. They are communicating how they call it agricultural, they include forestry, and then they step down to urban trees and shade. But the information of exactly how the funding is going to be applied or when we can apply it, or if it will be directly allocated to certain agencies or funds, that information has not necessarily trickled down and hasn't become available. But we are monitoring it, and I will communicate and include it in the morning minutes and communicate with you when and as we hear things developing and moving down the pipeline from just vague information to actual information.
Right. No, I agree. It is vague. And I would say, I work in this space a lot, and we throw this term around a lot, this environmental justice, and people instantly focus on cities. It doesn't have to be cities. There is a huge place for ODFW in that. And I think if you partner and you get the right clever people in that space, there really is a lot. I mean, and that's a big, big pot of money. It's kind of too big to ignore.
Right. Chair Wall, Commissioner King. Another thing that we're doing is, even if it's not within our focal areas, even if it's something that lies maybe not exactly what we're focusing on, we're still trying to put it on our website to let and communicate with our partners and let them know that these funding opportunities are available, or who they should talk to if they want to engage early on in the planning. So we're still trying to communicate all the IIJA information we have, because like Debbie said, it's a barrage of information that isn't well communicated, and you never know when it's coming. So we're filtering it through, and we are letting our partners know whether it's in focal areas or not, so that we can be that hub of information that we were talking about. So regardless what the issue is, we are trying to communicate those opportunities to bring in as much IIJA funding into Oregon, no matter what the purpose or the cause.
Right. And what are you setting up as, quote, the communication hub? Is it the conservation strategy website? How are you trying to do that?
Chair Wall, Commissioner King. We're both working on updating our website to have a lot more information, be visually appealing, and facilitate use. We send it out to our mailing lists that we have available with 600 partner organizations to just get the information to everyone and anyone. And if they contact me about something I don't specifically know, I connect them with the people that would know.
What I think is pretty amazing, if you haven't looked at an agency website lately, it's not always easy to find out who to talk to, but if you go to our IIJA webpage, like literally, I'm a watershed council and I've heard a buzz about something. You can literally go straight to every single person at ODFW to talk about whatever grants are open right now. So you don't have to go figure it out yourself. And that's been our philosophy. It's like, we're going to know the opportunities. We're going to get the word out through a lot of different ways. And then we're going to make ourselves available to talk to folks directly about what we know. And in some cases, like the Oak partnership, we applied as partnerships because we were an entity that qualified, and we're just passing the money through. So, again, same thing with IRA. We just want to get as much of this money to Oregon to do good things. We don't think that we're going to see this kind of investment again in our lifetime. And so we're with you. Whatever we can do to bring money to Oregon, that's our goal.
Thank you. I think we have one more comment from Deputy Director Palmieri, and then we'll move to temporary rules. So go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Wall. And I think I just wanted to sort of elaborate on that discussion with this slide here where we have the 3 successes. And that last piece, we cannot undersell what's happened there with ODFW staff, Andrea and Craig in particular, being an information hub on what all this is, stepping down from what the federal legislation said, a year ago, to how that's gotten to the federal agencies, how each of those federal agencies understands their role, the programs they've developed from that, the timelines that have developed from there, each of those phases. Andrea and Craig have been the only people in the state of Oregon who have seemed to figure that out. and it's been an incredible service that we've been able to provide to the whole state. And one of the reasons that a lot of our partners have been successful is because they haven't had to try to figure out all those layers themselves. They can go right to the information they need. And I wanted to highlight it's on the homepage. So if you visit the department's homepage, the top thing is what do you need to know about IIJA? And so I just wanted to really nail home that information hub piece.
Thank you. Remarkable effort. One more question and then we're going to move. Go ahead.
One more. Thank you for so much. And I'm so glad you guys just jumped on it in Oregon. And Commissioner Labhart has more tidbits from WAFLA too, just about how great Oregon is. But I would just say, I think there are so many intersections that we can do in Oregon also around that big influx to NRCS and where that can marry with ODFW. And I just want you to know that talk to me at some point, because I've got a couple different big initiative areas that I think that are part of our existing initiative, and maybe even another one that can really be helpful in that intersection. So thank you guys for your good work. Thank you, gals. Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's move, commissioners, if we can, to the temporary rules, and we have 8 of them. Are there any questions? Is that card still up from before? Are there questions on the temporary rules? If not, could I have a motion, please, on those?
Yeah, I'll read it. I move to ratify the 8 temporary rules set forth on the January 13, 2023 agenda.
A second.
It's been moved by Commissioner King and seconded by Commissioner Spilbrink to ratify the 8 temporary rules. We'll do a thumbs up on this one. Those in favor? Looks like everyone, Michelle, so that one is adopted. And we will then, thank you. We will we have a couple items for the commission update, and we may have one on the other business now that the director's back. But let's first go to Commissioner Labhart.
Okay, thank you, Chair Wall. I'm going to report on the WAFWA meeting. 16 states, as just mentioned before, are in the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. The winter meeting was just completed last week in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Commissioner Hatfield Hyde and I attended with Director Meltzer and Deputy Shannon Hearn. Commissioner Hyde and I had a 2-day meeting with fellow commissioners from those 16 other states. I think I'll speak for both of us here, and she can correct me if she disagrees, but I think we both learned a lot regarding what other states are dealing with and discussed some of the same issues we're facing. Becky gave our state report and talked about some of the successes and challenges that we're facing in our state. Among the challenges were that most states, which is pretty interesting, I thought, were dealing with hiring issues, being able to find enough employees to fill some of the vacancies that are out there, and in particular, finding a place that is affordable for these folks to live, particularly in the rural parts of their states. An analogy that I thought was related to all of us sitting here today was the following. Commissioners serve as essentially trustees. A trustee has assets. Our assets are the state's fish and wildlife. A trustee has beneficiaries. Ours are the citizens of Oregon, and that is not just like-minded people, but all the citizens of Oregon. A trust has trustees, or us as commissioners. The trustees allocate the benefits of those assets, fish and wildlife, To the citizens of Oregon, our beneficiaries. As trustees, we are charged with weighing all viewpoints, again, not just like-minded folks, and equitably consider those inputs provided by the department, our stakeholders, and the general public. We also talked a lot about what makes for an effective public input and how effective communications affect our decisions. Some of you have heard me use the statement that facts are facts, but perception is reality. Through effective communications, we hope to make sure that our citizens get the facts so that perceptions about Oregon's fish and wildlife are based on facts, not perceptions. And now I'll turn it over to Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde for any comments you might have from the meeting.
Yeah, I just think it was an incredible opportunity to get to hear from commissioners and directors in other states about what other states are doing. It made me proud of Oregon. It made me proud of our commission and also our stakeholders and our director and how we interact with one another in this state. And I think it matters. So that's what I'll say. It's a privilege to be a commissioner, and it's a privilege to have got to go to that meeting.
And thank you to both of you for being engaged on those and for paying so much attention to them and going. So thank you. I do have one other commissioner update that I want to provide, and then we'll have the director provide some information about the meeting he just had. This one is an item. We had a letter from 2 different tribes, and I'm not even sure that all of the other commissioners are aware of this one yet or have had a chance to see that letter yet, or those letters. But here's what I would like to do. I would like to acknowledge that this commission got a letter from the Nez Perce tribe and the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation with concerns about our fish passage rules. This commission takes tribal communication and consulting very seriously. That's a process that we want to, and I believe we have shown over the last years and months, that we will continue to respect that process. When an issue comes to the commission, we ask staff to frame that issue for us and provide a recommended path forward. Those recommendations are not the end of the discussion, but they are a critical starting point, and that's where we are right now. What I hope is that the tribal staff are working with our staff to do a couple things. One is to really clarify the differences that exist and to clarify a path forward and what that might look like. So more on this one later, but I wanted to make sure that we made that acknowledgement and let people know that that one has come in. So with that, I would like to move to the director to see if there's any update under other business, and then we will go to, well, we'll see what the time is.
Sure. Thanks, Chair. Well, I'll be very brief. I did just have a meeting with Jeff Huntington, the governor's new natural resources senior policy advisor. And it was a short introductory meeting. It was a good meeting. Karin Power, and some of you may know Karin Power, former state representative, is going to be his deputy natural resource policy advisor. She'll be focusing, I believe, mostly on, a major focus will be on climate related issues. But nonetheless, we'll be meeting again next week in person, and it was a very good, productive meeting.
Great, thank you. Good to have some information on that actually at this point. We have a few minutes before the 10 o'clock time certain, and I think what we will do is the first few of the public forum items. So the first person is Larry Brown and then Mia Shepherd. So we'll do a couple and see what our time is so that we meet our time commitment to the 10 o'clock.
Sure, well, Mia's.
Okay, then the second person would be David Moskowitz. So go ahead.
Thanks very, very much. I spoke at the August meeting and my subject is the Devil Lake Water Improvement District and Devil's Lake, which is located in Lincoln City, Oregon. Many of you are familiar with it, many of you not familiar with it. But it's just, at this particular juncture, it's just inundated with weeds. The use of the lake is over. You can't use it. It's just absolute mess. And it's been overlooked. You can blame COVID on some of it for the lack of responsibility of our water improvement district in getting the problem solved. But at this particular juncture, it's got to the crisis level. We have a lengthy survey that was done by an engineering firm up in Beaverton, and they will back up what I'm going to tell you today about the number and the amount of weeds in the lake. The amount of weeds in the lake are just absolutely astronomical. I'm going to put it in simple terms so we can all understand it. But I just want to mention a few things that we talk about solving the problem. Before, years ago, I've been on the lake for about 70 years, long time. The first one on there was about 10 years old, so it lets you know how old I am. But anyway, I'm proposing to put 32,000 triploid white Amur grass carp, 12 to 14 inches into that lake. Where did I come up with the 32,000? We fiddled around last time when we had the problem. We put in 10, then we put in 12. We ended up having to put 30,000 fish into the lake to solve the problem. Now we run up against some OAR rules here to say, well, no, you can't put that many in. I'm going to say those rules need to be amended. That takes time. I understand all of that. We may want to do something in the interim, but right now it's important that we get these fish in the lake. And I'm saying what's now, 1st of May. These fish, if we put them in now, they wouldn't eat anyway. They will not eat when the water temperature is under 55 degrees. So in Devil's Lake, that means we get 6 months worth of use out of these fish. The other 6 months, they're not going to eat a thing. The good news is that the small fish, which we're going to put in, the 12 to 14 inch fish, are vociferous eaters. They will eat as much as a 15 to 20 pound fish. As the fish get older and older and older, and we have these fish in the lake and we're worried about overpopulation, obviously we drop in 32,000. A lot of them are going to die. A lot of them are going to get hit by boats. You're going to have an attrition significantly. The other factor is so that we don't overdo the lake and have the fish overeat it, so there's no weeds in the lake at all, which we don't want. The fact that the fish that are older don't eat that much. So I think we have a good reason for putting a lot of fish in initially. I think the problem would solve itself down the road. The young fish will probably double in size. These are based on south water temperatures and things like that. They'll probably double in size every year. Down south, where the water temperature is warmer, they eat longer, they eat more. The higher the temperature gets, the more they eat. But we don't have any temperatures in the lake over 69 degrees, 70 degrees. So we're not going to get full use of the fish. I'm going to give you the volume share because I know I'm on a 3-minute time schedule here. The cost of the fish, we have another requirement that requires us to tag the fish. Tagging the fish triples the cost of the fish to us, 3.5 times to do that. Let me jump around a little bit because I know I'm going to run out of time.
You're going to have to wrap up if you will, Larry.
Yeah, I will. I'll try to wrap up. Volume of weeds in the lake, to give you some idea of the volumes of weeds in the lake. We've got 90%, and the survey backs up, we've got 90% of the lake is infested with the weeds. That's 67,500 10-yard dump trucks full of weeds. It assumes 10-yard dump trucks. If you can picture a house with the number of fish I'm putting in the lake, it's a fish tank. I'm putting 147 per acre. I'm putting one fish in to fill a room the size of a small house. So we're not overpopulating the lake with these things. We've got these huge volume dump truck loads full of weeds to be eaten. So I can go on with the tagging issues and things like that, but we need to amend some of these things.
Yeah, if I might interrupt, Chair Wall, and just I know Mr. Brown has provided his talking points in writing, I believe, and yes. So you all have those, and this is of course something you've heard about over the last several months, and back to you perhaps as early as February with some rulemaking, and I do appreciate Mr. Brown.
Yeah, I gave you bullet points on what I just discussed. You can read it in more detail. I'm happy to stay around if you want me to talk later, or you want to ask me questions, but feel free to get a hold of me at any time. I'll give some cards later on to Kurt. So anyway,
Thank you.
sorry for taking the time, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your work and for presenting to us. The next person, we'll do one more. And the next person is David Moskowitz. And one thing I didn't mention at the start is that we typically don't act on items brought to us in public forum. We usually give 3 minutes. We're trying to meet our 10 o'clock time. So we're going to be pretty strict, even though we weren't so on the first one. David, keep it within your time.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Fedorowicz, members of the Commission, Director Meltzer, David Moskowitz with the Conservation Angler. I was going to cover a couple different issues, but a couple of my colleagues from the North Umpqua Coalition will be speaking on the North Umpqua in a minute. Regarding the fish passage rules, we think this is a significant issue. Obviously, our group testified in support of these rules in December. We believe that the tribes have pointed out a very serious issue with these changes. And so we agree with their assessment. And we think that this really could convey a right to an owner of a fish passage structure to actually request action that could result in a measurable loss of fish passage that could happen before this is fixed. So we think there's a sense of urgency to address this matter. And we would request that Director Melcher use his delegated authority to adopt emergency temporary rules to revert back to the October language on the definition of volitional passage, and that would create the space for a direction from the Commission to convene a very specifically tailored Rules Advisory Committee to address this specific issue. We think there's urgency here. We realize that there's issues between the tribes and the department in coming together to solve this, but they're not the only interested party. So we think that emergency rule is very important. I'm not going to talk about North Umpqua here, although I would love to. Regarding Columbia Basin steelhead, in terms of, we support the conservation measures that have been put in place the past few years with the low returns of wild steelhead to the Columbia. Right now, it's basically it's sort of a red light, green light situation. It's closed, the red light's on, and then it's open, full on. Or it starts open and then goes to a stop. We think there needs to be, we're preventing anglers some opportunity on these fish that they deserve a lot of conservation, but there should be a yellow light kind of approach. We think the department needs to work with anglers and conservation groups to develop an alternative approach that allows a moderate amount of angling opportunity that reduces encounters and reduces mortality, but still provides opportunity. Otherwise, people are left on the bank or they're not even out on the rivers at all. I think you're going to hear something about this from Mia Shepherd following my comments, but what doesn't exist now is allowing opportunity in a way that is responsive to the numbers of wild fish when they're on that border between critical abundance threshold. And if you have 10 fish over that, the fishery is usually on. And so if you moderated the fishery with certain rules, and they're not really in the quiver of management tools yet for the department, we're missing out. And so we'd like to get to that. And I realize I'm over, can't seem to come within that 3 minutes. Really appreciate this opportunity though during public forum. So I really appreciate Director Melcher and Michelle Tate's efforts to allow us to testify. And I'm happy to answer any questions and I'll be here for a couple of hours to listen in.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's take one more person, and that would be Miles Johnson. Oh, she is ready? Okay, go ahead, Mia Shepherd.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you see me? Yeah.
Can't see you yet, but go.
Okay.
Yes, we can, and we can hear you, so you'll
okay.
have minutes.
That's good. I'm in a truck taking care of business because I leave for the Bahamas tomorrow for 4 months. But good morning, Chairman Wall and commissioners. I'm here to comment about steelhead closures on the John Day the last 2 years and how the closures are impacting rural communities, guides and outfitters and the anglers, and propose a regulation change that will help decrease the mortality rate of steelhead caused by anglers when catch and releasing. Taking anglers off a river takes away the people who care the most. And we haven't been there for 2 years. And a lot of our clients are missing out. But there is a way to accomplish both protecting wild steelhead while allowing a fishery, and that is a permanent regulation change that will eliminate the use of live and artificial bait. There's studies that show there is a higher mortality rate associated with the use of bait than lures, jigs, and flies. In a study by ODFW, hooking mortality rates for use in steelhead fisheries, fish caught using bait were more likely to be hooked in critical locations compared to fish caught using lures and jigs. Critical areas are the places like the tongue and the esophagus. And then in another study by Colorado State University, post-release hooking mortality of rainbow trout caught on scented artificial bait, overall mortality was 21% for fish caught on ABA, that's artificial bait fished actively, and 32% for fish caught on ABP, artificial bait fished passively, and was 4% for fly caught fish. The difference in mortality among gear types resulted from difference in the number of fish hooked in critical areas. Overall critical hookings were 3.9 for fly caught fish and 45% for ABA and 78 for ABP, the ABP group. So eliminating bait and the more, so there's other studies out there that support this. I'm not a scientist, but there's a lot of great reading material out there by a lot of great scientists. My husband and I are one of 10 outfitters who take people fishing for steelhead on the John Day and who make a living at it. And the season is short. Most outfitters guide between October 25th to December 15th. Our company, Little Creek Outfitters, takes about 60 anglers fishing during this time. And these anglers stay in hotels, eat in restaurants, and buy gas in Sherman, Wasco, and Gilliam counties. We also employ 5 guides during this time. According to the Travel Oregon Recreational Economic Study, the combined visitor spending associated with fishing in Gilliam and Sherman County was $8.2 million and generated approximately $172,000 in state and local taxes. I know this doesn't sound like much if you live in Portland, but to rural communities and small businesses, this is a lot, and every outfitter and our clients are big contributors to the overall consumer spending. So another closure on the John Day is just going to jeopardize our businesses. Please consider a permanent rule change to eliminate live and artificial bait on the John Day from October 1st through the end of May. And this is the right thing to do to preserve recreational opportunity and protect wild steelhead. Also, ODFW biologists and ask them to open the fishery this fall. If it's a choice between no fishing or changing tackle to allow a fishery, I believe people are going to make the right choice. And that is just, to change tackle. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I also want to say this letter has the support of Oregon Outfitters and Guides Association and the Oregon Frontier Chamber of Commerce, and as well as the other 10 guides. So there are 9. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mia. We're going to interrupt public forum now and ask, we will move to agenda item B, which is tribal consultation. We'll ask Davia Palmieri and Sean Clements to come up for.
I'm just going to run and take a bathroom break. I mean, is that
okay.
all right?
Go ahead. Go right ahead. Yes.
Happy for it to continue.
When we do come back, we will, and apologies to the public forum people, there are 3 who did not get a chance to do it right now. So we will come back to those after this item, and then we will continue with the rest of the agenda. So which one of you will go ahead. You're first, Sean?
Yeah, are we waiting?
No, we're going to go ahead. She said, go ahead.
Okay. Chair Wall, Vice Chair Zanowitz, members of the Commission, Director Melcher, for the record, Sean Clements, Deputy in Fish Division. So I'm here today to introduce a discussion between the Commission and 3 of the tribes regarding the North Umpqua Hatchery Summer Steelhead Program. This discussion had its genesis in 2021, where we saw a region-wide decline in the returns of summer steelhead from Cape Blanco north into British Columbia. The decline was most pronounced in Oregon in the North Umpqua system, although we did see declines in the Silex and throughout the Columbia Basin. In the North Umpqua system, the population there had been averaging around 2,000 to 3,000 for the last several decades, with some highs and lows within that. We saw some pretty good highs in the early 2000s, but then in 2010s, we saw the decreases associated with the poor ocean conditions during that period. But then in 2021, it really dropped off precipitously, and we had about 450 odd fish come back that year. So a very significant decline. So given that decline, we asked our team of scientists to look into what the likely causes of that might be, which included looking at freshwater and ocean conditions, whether predation or disease might be having an impact, whether harvest might be having an impact, and also whether the hatchery program might be having an impact. We also asked them to look into what future conditions might look like and how the population might respond to those to help guide our management actions going forward in terms of recovering the population. The department concluded that the decline in that 2021 was strongly related to very poor ocean and freshwater conditions. In the ocean, we had the most intense negative phase of the MPGO in about 70 years, combined with really poor ocean entry conditions from about 2014 through 2019. Additionally, on land, we had very poor freshwater conditions in terms of temperatures and flow for about 2017 through 2019. And then in 2021, actually, when these fish were returning, we also had the heat wave that you'll probably all recall. And subsequent analysis also showed that during that heat wave, temperatures in the main stem umpqua were sufficiently high that it blocked the migration of those summer steelhead for the majority of their period. So essentially, if they were coming back, they couldn't get up to the spawning grounds. The department also found that there was no evidence that the decline was caused by the hatchery program. This was based on a weight of evidence where we looked at correlations between the release size and productivity of the wild population. Also looking at spatial segregation, where the majority of the hatchery fish tend to spawn in Rock Creek, which is kind of marginal wild fish habitat historically. And then thirdly, that when we looked at the PVA, which is population viability assessment based on stock recruit functions, if you account for the productivity of hatchery fish in that PVA and you vary it between those hatchery fish are producing no offspring to they're producing the same number of offspring as wild fish, we found there was really no impact on the viability results there. In other words, and the most likely explanation for that is, again, going back to the spatial segregation, where they're just not contributing at the same, in the same areas. And in terms of future prospects, we found that the population was likely to increase in the near term in abundance, and that was based on the improving ocean forecasts and improving freshwater conditions. We found that the upper tributaries are going to be resilient to climate change to some extent, but we also found that ocean conditions are likely to have impact marine survival and growth going forward. And because of that, there's going to be some significant challenges to this population and likely others too. But there was also those positive indications of resilience in the upper basin. Next. As we were going through this process, there was obviously significant public interest in this, significant and polarized. It precipitated largely by a petition that came forth in, I think, January of last year, where the relief sought was to temporarily terminate the program and wait until we reach the PGOS goals and the CMP.
The department was already undergoing an analysis at that time, so the petition was denied, and the department committed to bring to the commission a recommendation in April. As part of that public process, we finished the analysis in, I think it was March, released it April 1, and we held a webinar to kind of inform the public of the results of that study. We also held a town hall in Roseburg, and we released a public survey to collect opinions on what the likely causes might be and what should be done about it. And as I said, the results of all of that public engagement was a lot of polarization about what should be done and what the causes were. The department's recommendation to the commission in April was to reduce the summer steelhead program to 30,000 in the near term and adaptively manage to remain below the PHOS levels. Next. The commission decision was to terminate, to not release the summer smolts in 2022 and terminate the program. Next. So subsequent to that meeting, there was a legal challenge from Douglas County and a local guide, and they sought some injunctive relief in May, which the court granted. And that meant the department was legally bound to release the fish that were on hand and continue the program until the court made its decision. So the department released, I think, about 68,000 smolts and outplanted 7,000 that did not migrate out volitionally. The court heard oral arguments in September, and following the completion of those oral arguments, the judge ruled from the bench that he was referring it to the Court of Appeals to determine which court, if any, had authority to rule over this case. The appeals court heard oral arguments in December, and we're still waiting their decision. Next. So that brings us to today. Following the April meeting, the commission in May made a motion to hear additional information from the tribes. And that's where we're at today is the tribes are here to present and talk with you about any additional information related to this topic.
Thank you, Sean. Davia, did you have other to add at this time? I do want to mention, and your summary brings us to exactly the point I wanted to mention, which is this is our chance to hear from the tribes. We heard requests, and we have 4 tribes, representatives from 4 different tribes ready to speak today. This is one component in the consultation process that is a broader process than just what you're seeing here, but this is an important piece. And colleagues, just to remind you, this is our chance to hear from the tribes, the additional information that they would like in front of us. And so we can ask follow-up questions. This is not an action item, however, so we won't have motions and we won't have decisions, but it's a great chance to hear more information. So with that, I'd like to, we have 4 tribes. The first one is the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, and we have 3 different representatives, I believe, who are ready to speak for the Grand Ronde. Kelly Dirksen, David Fullerton, Colby Drake, and I'll ask the 3 of you to reintroduce yourselves when you start speaking as well. Huh? Oh.
Not a problem.
We're going to change direction. They would like the Cow Creek tribe to go first. So forget the introduction I just gave you. And we'll hear from Kelly Coates and Anthony Broadman. And if the 2 of you from the Cow Creek band of the Umpqua Tribe of Indians will introduce yourselves as well.
Chair Wall, Vice Chair Zarnowitz, members of the commission, and Director Melcher. Bedu, Kelly Coates Kuriitka, Nahangu Dana Aite. Friends, Kelly Coates is my name, and I am of the Cow Creek Umpqua people. And I'm the Director of Natural Resources for the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians. And I've worked for the tribe since 2011. And I have to say, it's nice to see you all again. Seems like it hasn't been that long.
No.
First, the tribe would like to genuinely thank you for your invitation to be here today to discuss the North Umpqua Hatchery Summer Steelhead Program. We greatly appreciate the ability to discuss our concerns with you and your willingness to listen. I do want to note that we were given a very limited amount of time to prepare for this meeting, with part of that preparation time occurring over the holidays. So while the tribe has done its best to prepare substantive comments for the commission, this is the testimony we were able to pull together on short notice. I'm providing a brief overview today of our concerns, and if the commission wants further information on any of the topics or data I discussed today, please feel free to reach out to the tribe. Also, we would respectfully request that for future meetings, the tribe is provided with a little more notice. As a governmental entity, the generation of this type of testimony requires a substantial amount of time and resources, and my department is already stretched very thin. Some background about the tribe and our approach and beliefs. The tribe takes an all-fish approach to aquatic resources management. Too often, when discussing fisheries management, the discussion turns to debate over hatchery and wild fish. We do not consider the issue at hand to be wild versus hatchery. The tribe does not want to be reliant on hatchery fish. The tribe's ultimate goal is to have sustainable runs of wild fish in a quantity that would allow everyone to harvest. However, we're not there yet. It is my hope that someday we will get there. The tribe has a robust fisheries and aquatic habitat restoration, which I outlined the last time I talked with you all a bit. While we work with hatcheries, we also recognize the importance of restoring habitat for wild fish and all native aquatic species. Based on ODFW's own science assessment of naturally produced summer steelhead in the Umpqua River Basin, the primary cause of the downturn was low ocean survival due to poor marine conditions. The secondary cause was poor freshwater conditions that impacted survival during multiple years of juvenile outmigration, and likely during 2021, as Sean mentioned, when adults were returning to spawn. Additional potential causes are non-native fish predation on outmigrants, as exacerbated by stream temperature changes, disease, and a thiamine deficiency. The science indicates the North Umpqua Hatchery Summer Steelhead Program does not pose a threat to wild summer steelhead survival. The biggest threats are changing ocean conditions and degrading freshwater conditions. In other words, climate change and drought. We should be working toward reducing the threats to wild summer steelhead that were identified in ODFW's report. Based on the report, stream restoration should be a key component in the recovery of wild summer steelhead to mitigate for impacts from a changing climate, such as increased water temperatures. Replanting for stream shading in the riparian areas, especially in areas where wildfires have recently burned through the streamside vegetation, should be a priority. Juan Zell et al. In their 2019 publication modeled future climate scenarios for the Middle Fork John Day River. They developed alternative future scenarios based on downscaled projections from climate change models and the composition and structure of native riparian forests. They examined 36 scenarios combining future changes in air temperature, stream discharge, and riparian vegetation. The study results indicate that restoring riparian vegetation where streams are poorly shaded can offset the influence of projected increases in air temperature and reduce stream discharge under a changing climate. Stream temperatures are more sensitive to changes in shade than to changes in either air temperature or stream discharge, and the effect of restoring streamside shade could result in future stream temperatures that are colder than today, even under a warmer climate with substantially lower late summer stream flow. In addition, we should be focusing research on what is happening in the ocean and if there are ways that we can address the ocean conditions. I recognize that the predictions for climate conditions are not favorable in some areas. However, the tribe is not willing to give up on our sacred lands and our culturally significant species. If the North Umpqua Hatchery Summer Steelhead Program is eliminated, it will sever our ties to our cultural traditional practice of subsistence fishing. We cannot harvest wild summer steelhead because their numbers are too low, and we do not want to impact the wild population. However, if we lose the connection to the fish, we lose our culture. This result is unacceptable to us. This is not just an issue for wild summer steelhead in the Umpqua. ODFW's trend analysis indicated significant correlations between North Umpqua summer steelhead and other summer steelhead populations in Oregon, meaning that these other populations were also experiencing declines. and suggesting that large-scale ocean and/or climate drivers play a substantial role in regulating returns. Runs of summer steelhead all the way up into British Columbia saw depressed numbers in 2021. While the escapement estimate of 449 summer steelhead for 2021 was below the critical abundance threshold of 1,200 fish and was the lowest escapement estimate in the record from 1946 to 2021, Winchester Dam counts for wild summer steelhead for 2022 are 1,346 wild fish, which is above the critical abundance threshold. I'm encouraged to see the increased number of wild fish returning. However, I do have concerns about them persisting into the future, as you all do. If numbers of wild fish continue to decline, we may find ourselves in a conservation hatchery situation. An example of this is the Emergency Conservation Hatchery Program for fall Chinook that ODFW and the Coquille Indian Tribe initiated for the Coquille River. If we eliminate the North Umpqua Hatchery Summer Steelhead Program and do not have the infrastructure in place to continue monitoring these fish, it will be more difficult and more expensive to restart the program down the road if necessary. The science assessment stated that there is no indication that the hatchery summer steelhead program has negatively affected naturally produced summer steelhead, although there are more hatchery fish on natural spawning grounds than the management threshold allows. We acknowledge that there is a proportion of hatchery origin spawners or PHOS issue. The PHOS issue is what we should be spending time discussing and resolving, not the elimination of the entire program. To address the PHOS issue in Rock Creek, where the majority, about 75% of straying occurs, the tribe is working with ODFW to fix the ladder on Rock Creek and to cap the old ladder to eliminate hatchery fish in Upper Rock Creek and decrease the PHOS. We've committed significant funds and staff time to address this issue, as most of the straying happens in Rock Creek. If we can decrease the PHOS there, we will be able to meet the goals established in the CMP. We also acknowledge the letter from the North Umpqua Coalition stating that there is additional straying into the upper reaches of the North Umpqua that is increasing PHOS. However, we want to note that the numbers of fish passing Soda Springs do not paint the full picture. The fish counted going up the dam could be fish that go up early, look for cool water, and then head back down to Rock Creek to spawn. We think additional studies, including the monitoring of the downstream passage of adult fish at Soda Springs and tagging or telemetry studies are necessary to determine if in fact hatchery fish are actually spawning above Soda Springs. A telemetry study on steelhead in the North Umpqua River Basin was done in 1998 through 2001 by Dave Loomis, John Rash, Rod Thompson, and Bob Ryan. The results were published in 2003. The study showed that Rock Creek fish would pass the confluence of Rock Creek, go further up the North Umpqua River, then return back to Rock Creek during the fall rains. We think a new telemetry study is needed to see if the reasoning behind the hatchery steelhead crossing Soda Springs Dam are the fish seeking cold water refuge. With climate change and warmer water temperatures, the fish are having to go further up in the basin in search of cool water. If in fact, based on the studies, there is a PHOS issue, then we can determine a way to remove the hatchery fish at Soda Springs. The study also showed that there is near zero impact to the wild spawning population in Steamboat Creek from hatchery fish, which was also stated in the recent ODFW science assessment. Steamboat Creek is a preferred spawning subbasin for over half of the naturally produced wild summer steelhead spawners in the North Umpqua. The tribe has been supportive of protecting the Steamboat and Canton Creek watersheds and fully supported the 2019 Frank and Jeannie Moore Wild Steelhead Sanctuary legislation that elevates steelhead management as a conservation priority for the watersheds. Also, in the future, we recommend acclimating all hatchery fish at Rock Creek on Rock Creek water as much as possible, not North Umpqua water, to reduce strain. We know fish imprint at the eyed egg stage and the smolt stage based on work done by the Oregon Hatchery Research Center. Accordingly, keeping fish on Rock Creek water should help decrease any confounding factors introduced by fish being raised on North Umpqua water. Stay with me, I'm almost done. In 2022, all 5 of the Western Oregon tribes sent letters or gave testimony indicating that they are in favor of keeping the North Umpqua Hatchery Summer Steelhead program. For the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians, we did this because we believe there is a path forward that does not end in the program being eliminated, but instead creates more partnership opportunities and dialogue between the state and tribes. This is also why we ask for consultation before decisions are made that will impact our ability to engage in our cultural practices on our ancestral homelands. Too often, things become polarized in a hatchery versus wild fish debate. We believe people need to be able to sit down and have what may be a difficult conversation, but will ultimately result in better management of our culturally significant species. It is okay if all the parties do not agree on everything, but we should be able to come to the table and discuss the issues. It is for that reason that we thank you for your time today and your willingness to have a hard conversation with us. In summary, we think there's additional work that can be done to make the program better and additional scientific studies that can be done to determine what the PHOS is above Soda Springs Dam and ultimately reduce PHOS and straying before the program is eliminated. We respectfully request that the Commission reverse their decision to terminate the North Umpqua Hatchery Summer Steelhead program and work with the tribes to make the program better into the future while addressing the PHOS issue. This type of co-management and collaborative problem solving is exactly what we intend to embark on through our recently approved agreement with ODFW. Thank you, and I'll hand it off to Anthony now.
Thank you. Let's go ahead with you, if you will, and then commissioners, if you have questions of either of the two of them, we can ask them at the end. So go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Wall. Thank you, commissioners. My name is Anthony Broadman. I'm General Counsel for the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians. The tribe, as Kelly noted, formally requests that the commission reverse its decision to terminate the North Umpqua Hatchery Summer Steelhead program. We strongly believe that the state is able to work with the tribes to make this program better into the future while still addressing the PHOS issue. I want to recognize that there is litigation surrounding this issue, but this request is not related to that litigation. This is a request from a fellow sovereign, a request from the tribe, a sovereign government regarding resources within its ancestral territory in recognition of the unique relationship between the tribe and the state, a relationship that the state has continually been working to improve. The commission should, to the extent possible, ignore what is happening in court and do the right thing by your partners in conservation and the first stewards of the North Umpqua fishery. I need to start by lauding ODFW for its work with the tribes. You and your staff really exemplify the spirit of government-to-government relations that Oregonians expect state agencies to pursue with tribal governments. In particular, your recent agreements that we all met on in December with tribes to co-manage fish and wildlife serve as a model for other state bodies to follow. Please continue to do the hard work of repairing the state's relationship with tribes and forging a new and lasting accord based on mutual respect and sovereignty. All of that said, on your agenda today, you identify this meeting as consultation. And as Kelly indicated, the tribe greatly appreciates your willingness to engage in this dialogue, our ability to engage in this dialogue with you. But the tribe does not consider this to be true consultation. We hope that this is the beginning and a shift in the tribe and the state's relationship. And we believe that insight into what the tribe considers to be consultation could be helpful to the agency. First, the commission has already issued a decision to terminate the program. Good faith consultation, as required by ORS 182-164, subsection 3, must occur before an agency makes a decision. The consultation policies of other state agencies recognize this. The Oregon Health Authority's tribal consultation, for instance, requires the agency to meaningfully consult with tribes on any policy that will impact the tribes before any action is taken. That's in OHA consultation policy subsection 6. Good faith consultation with other governments is recognized in other forums, requires state agencies to consult with tribes prior to the time that the decision was made. Second, this is a public meeting, and we completely understand the obligations of this agency and your requirement to comply with public meeting laws. However, government-to-government consultation can't occur in a public meeting. The tribe vastly preferred meeting with some of the commissioners in a non-quorum setting. Public meetings are places where we as governments deliberate and consider approval or disapproval of agency actions, and they can certainly reflect the result of consultation, but they are not consultation themselves. Non-public meetings are particularly important in matters like the Summer Steelhead Program, where the tribe has a significant interest in the program. The tribe's invested a substantial amount of time and resources into the survival of summer steelhead. It has a unique point of view on a sensitive issue that should be able to be expressed on a government-to-government basis, not broadcast in a public meeting. Third, meetings without more between state agencies and tribes are not consultation. For meaningful consultation to occur, there must be a back and forth. Tribes must be able to impact the end result of an agency action. Hopefully, the invitation in this meeting is one of the Commission's first steps in recognizing the unique government-to-government relationship between the tribe and the state, and we welcome the opportunity to work with you further on the North Umpqua Hatchery Summer Steelhead Program. We think the above considerations highlight the need for an improved consultation policy. As your sister agency, OHA, puts it, quote, tribal consultation is not invoked when a policy is not followed. This agency could benefit from modifying your consultation policies or procedures. I want to also note you're not alone in the state family. Other agencies struggle. The ODFW's work with tribes is among the most important and admirable of Oregon's administrative agencies. Our recent history negotiating and entering into the intergovernmental agreement between the state and the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians is a standard for how these relationships should be pursued. Let's ensure that that practice reflects our aspirations moving forward. You have the opportunity to get back on course. Please listen to the science, listen to the original stewards of the North Umpqua, the Cow Creek Umpqua people. You will never go wrong pausing and listening to the indigenous voices whose knowledge and commitment to these waters should help guide all of your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Commissioners, questions? If not, we'll go ahead and work our way through the next speakers, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
The next group will be the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. They're the three names that I read before. So Kelly Dirksen, David Fullerton, and Colby Drake. And then we'll hear from the Coquel Indian tribe, and that person is the person representing that tribe is John Ogan. So go ahead, and if you will introduce yourselves as well.
Yeah, good morning, Commission. Good morning, Chair Wall. Good morning, ODF staff, ODFW staff. Today, we don't actually have David Fullerton with us today. It'll just be us two providing testimony. My name is Colby Drake. I'm a member of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. I'm also the Natural Resources Department Manager and also a native Oregonian who is born and raised in Southern Oregon. Today, my intent is to help show the significance of the Summer Steelhead program on the North Umpqua River and how it is significant to the people of the Umpqua Valley. A story that I was once told was the meaning of Umpqua it means full tummy. And as you can see, the Umpqua provides many opportunities to provide a full tummy. We all know a lot of the issues as Kelly Coates from Cow Creek presented on the science and some of the issues related to the hatchery, to water temperatures, to water quality, and non-native fish on the North Umpqua fishery. Being born and raised in Sutherland and on the Umpqua River, I've had many opportunities to fish with my grandfather and my father and my children on the Umpqua River. I had the opportunity to catch my first salmon when I was 7 years old in second grade during the summer with my granddad. As you can imagine, being a 7-year-old catching an 18 to 20 pound salmon weighing a quarter of your body weight, it was quite the experience. Growing up in this area and visiting the hatchery, Rock Creek Fish Hatchery during the summer, during field trips for school, during outdoor school on the Little River, visiting the Winchester Dam on our trips to Roseburg and coming back to pick up groceries on the weekends. These were important, significant moments in our lives growing up as members of Douglas County and members of Native American tribes. Every weekend we would stop at the fish ladder in Roseburg or on Winchester Dam to count the fish, to see everything coming up, to talk about the importance of this fishery and what it means to our families. My father is 70 years old. He was born in 1952 and has fished on this river his whole life. Before him, his father brought him out here, and they used to spend over 90+ days fishing on this river from dawn to dusk, providing subsistence to our families. Growing up, it was very unique for me. I felt like I was one of the only children that I knew growing up or in this area that were able to eat salmon every week. It was a tradition for us. Every Sunday night, we would have salmon. We'd have families over and we would celebrate that. So this fishery is very important to me and my family, and not just as a Native American and as a natural resource manager, but also as just a Native Oregonian. One thing as our tribe looks at is 7 generations. The way I interpret the 7 generations is starting with me. I look back at the 3 generations previous to me, my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents. I have an opportunity to impact those people's beliefs and their opportunities that they were given. And then also starting with me, I have 3 more generations ahead of me, my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. And so the way I look at it is those 3 generations before me and those 3 generations after me. What I'm doing today and the impacts and decisions that we're making can either move those decisions and things from that previous generations to the new generations coming forward. And that's my intent today, is to hope to share that with you guys, that how important it is to pass that information and that tradition onto the next 3 generations that I can have an impact on. Thank you for the opportunity to present this information with you guys today. I'm very excited for just to see this opportunity, and I'll turn it over to Kelly Dirksen now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Director Melcher. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you this morning. We had 2 kind of goals to speak to you today, is to express our concern and connection to the area and support the other tribes. The other goal was to address issues with the consultation process to this point. So I drew the shorter straw of the 2 goals. On that, I think we can talk about details on how the tribes came together to voice their concerns, and then not exactly hearing how those were addressed. I don't want to go into too many details there. I think the broader statement would be that when the tribes voice a sovereign nation, if there's the appearance that that carries no additional weight than any individual citizen, it will create enormous tension within the tribes, frustration, and a missed opportunity for all of us. So part of our goal is to look for ways that we work with you to improve that consultation process. So that's what we're asking for. I want to draw attention that we do have a really positive working relationship with ODFW staff. Director Melcher and his staff should be highly commended for the work they've done. I'm very proud of the working relationship that we've built, and it wasn't always that way. I'm not wanting to air dirty laundry, but I think it's informative for our steps forward with you, with the commission, to talk about that. When I started 28 years ago, our relationship with ODFW staff could best be described as recognizing the existence of the other. It was pretty much limited to that. We immediately looked for ways to open lines of communication. Once we did that, we realized that we share common goals on a number of areas. Then just sharing information transitioned to that we were closer to cooperators on projects. And more recently, I feel like we're moving into an area where we are actively and productively finding ways to work together. And a good example of that would be work at Willamette Falls. We are co-signers of the permit to address the sea line issues at the falls, but we didn't sign that with you and then walk away. We are providing for the last few years office space, work facilities for ODFW staff free of charge. And we have worked on a number of issues, everything from rescuing orphan bear cubs to sea lions, and we look forward to opportunities in the future to work together. I was tasked with this fairly late last night, so I apologize if I'm not completely have it all together, but I initially looked for ways to play lawyer up here and cite provisions in Senate Bill 770 and tell you why you have to talk to tribes. And I think that's kind of not the message I would like to send. I think the message I would like to send is I think it's in your interest to talk to the tribes. You should talk to tribes because it's to your benefit. And that's not at all a threat. It's more of a statement of opportunity. Kelly Coates has talked to you just about how she's already addressing fish ladders. We have other things that we think we can do together. What's really powerful to me is that that I've had great respect for the natural resources programs of the other tribes along the coast for years. But over this last year, I got a much clearer picture of their capacity. And these folks are extremely talented, very knowledgeable, highly driven, and they have great leadership behind them to facilitate the work that they do. That's why I say it's in your interest to work with these folks to a greater goal. It's not lost on me at all that you've asked for this meeting, and I think this is a really positive step going forward, and I hope it's the first of many steps that we take together. The challenges that Oregon's wildlife faces are daunting, and I think we will get a lot further if we do it together than if we do it independently. That's my message. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? And I will comment just very briefly that your messages are heard, of course, but also have to say that I come into these things knowing more about what consultation isn't than what it is. So it's useful to hear your messages.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we will go then to the Hopewell Indian Tribe and John Ogan C. online. And then after that, we have the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, and we have two people ready to represent that tribe. So go ahead, John.
Thank you, Chair Wall. Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Zarnowitz, Commissioners, Director Melcher. My name is John Ogan. I'm the Assistant Executive Director for the Coquille Indian Tribe, leading up the branch of natural resources here. First, like my colleagues from both the Cow Creek Tribe and the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, appreciate the commissioners giving the tribes an opportunity to speak further with the commission about its decision last April to terminate the Rock Creek or North Umpqua Summer Steelhead program. Also, like my colleagues, while we do appreciate the opportunity, it did come with short notice and with some attributes of this particular session that we do not associate with meaningful, government to government consultation. But it is a step that we want to acknowledge and thank you for. Chair Wall, particularly appreciate your introductory remarks indicating that this was not in and of itself a government to government consultation with each of the interested tribes, but part of a larger process. I'm not sure you use those precise words, but that's how I understood it. Thank you for that. Also appreciate Sean Clement's recap of the timeline and the process that took us to the conversation that we're having today. What I want to underscore there is, of course, the commission made a very difficult decision last April. There was a tremendous amount of information presented by the tribes, by other entities and groups and individuals interested in retaining the summer steelhead program at Rock Creek to continue to provide all of the opportunities that are presented by having those fish and fishery opportunity. And there's a tremendous amount of information provided by those who recommended that it be terminated, as the commission did. I don't envy you for having to process so much information and to make any sort of decision without more time to deliberate, follow up, discuss all that was put in front of you, put on your table that day and the few days leading up to it. So I think that this is an opportunity tailored to the tribes, but for the broader discussion to be revisited. As I've spent many years in Oregon working with tribes on natural resources issues and watching the work of the commission, yourself, your predecessors, while I can't say that the tribes that I've worked with have always agreed with your decisions, one of the hallmarks of the decision-making of the commission that I don't think, what I think really stand out is that you seek to make your decisions based on the best information that you have and to fully understand all of the information. The decision was made last April to terminate the program. And as some of my colleagues have said, 9 months have passed and we've learned a lot. And I'm going to characterize really 3 different types of new information that I believe is, in the Coquille Indian tribe believes, is incumbent for this commission to consider. So subsequent to the decision in April to terminate the program, there's significant new policy developments that I believe the commission needs to reflect upon and consider. Primarily, the commission has approved 2 unique and historic cooperative management agreements. The first with the Coquille Indian tribe and most recently with the Cow Creek tribe. Again, applaud those decisions. They are historic. They are examples for other agencies and other states. I've actually received phone calls from 2 other states on the West Coast asking how we were able to do this. I bet my colleague, Director Melcher's, similarly heard those questions. People are paying attention to those. Those cooperative management agreements really do reflect a new commitment on the state of Oregon to engage tribes in their expertise and their values in a different way. Those did not exist in April when you made your decision. So there are significant policy developments that have intervened since that time that I think the commission really needs to step back and reflect upon. What do those cooperative management agreements mean for engaging those 2 tribes, and not to the exclusion of others, but under the cooperative management framework about the future of the summer steelhead program? That's new. Also subsequent to your decision in April, there are significant technical developments. As you all know, there is a parallel piece of work being done by the department, and they're doing it in coordination with interested tribes about the future of the Rock Creek facility generally. There's been a lot of work and analysis that the department and the tribes are doing themselves, and then just really now bringing it together, that demonstrates that there is a lot of technical information that the commission, I would submit, did not have when it was trying to decide what is the best future for the North Umpqua steelhead. As we investigate kind of what sort of infrastructure and devices and operations could be developed at Rock Creek, as we think about the infrastructure generally, there are many of these items that really could address, I think, what was the primary concern, and that was the PHOS issue, as my colleague Kelly Coates described. That information wasn't before the commission in April. We've learned a lot about the technical pieces. Third, since April, we have additional biological information to consider. As Dr. Clements explained, the staff's primary determination in looking at the summer steelhead issues for the North Umpqua was that Low ocean productivity, poor ocean conditions were the driving factor, not only in North Umpqua, but coast-wide. That is changing. I think Dr. Clements has shared that previously in April, and we've been talking about it in other contexts since. Ocean productivity has increased tremendously. There is another data set, so to speak. Again, my colleague Kelly Coates spoke to it. Although the forecasted returns for North Umpqua wild steelhead for 2021 was under 500, that was more than doubled. I think all of us working in the field believe that that is evidence that ocean productivity has changed and may be entering a period of much more highly productive conditions for North Umpqua steelhead and all Pacific salmonids on our coast. That is information that I believe the Coquille tribe believes that the commission needs to consider. We have new data. We have new biological information. If you look up and down the coast this past spring, summer, and fall, it's not only that we're seeing kind of the measurables in the ocean change, we are exceeding forecasts for many anadromous fish populations up and down the coast this year. So it wasn't an anomaly that the North Umpqua wild steelhead did better. That's happening coast-wide. So I'll conclude my remarks by saying I'd ask the commission to continue with what I called a hallmark of the institution, and that is to consider all of the information, the most current, credible information, whether it's policy, again, we have new developments, whether it's technical, we have new developments with the collaborative work we've been doing with the department about the future of the hatchery, and certainly biological. We have quite literally new data to consider based on the returns and the changing productivity of the ocean. With that, like the Cow Creek tribe, the Coquille Indian tribe understands that today is not a decision-making process. There is not an action item. Nonetheless, we want the record to reflect that the Coquille Indian tribe also is requesting that the commission rescind its decision made in April to terminate the summer steelhead program for Rock Creek and to continue to work with the tribes and its department to develop an alternative future that allows the tribes to continue to have access to these culturally valuable fish. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. And I don't see questions at this time, so we'll go ahead and move to the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians. And we have two people, Colin Beck and Ashley Russell. Are they online, Michelle? So we'll go to you, Colin, as soon as the online opens up.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Zarnowitz, Commissioners. My name is Colin Beck. I'm the Director of Forest Management for the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians. The Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw support restoration of wild salmon and steelhead runs on which the tribe has subsisted since time immemorial. While restoration of healthy runs is the ultimate goal for the tribe, we also support the use of hatchery augmentation to provide subsistence fishing opportunities for tribal members where this can be achieved without negatively affecting wild runs. We feel that this is the case for the North Umpqua Hatchery Summer Steelhead Program. This hatchery program provides valuable opportunities for our tribal members to practice their culture and traditional lifeways. We agree with the ODFW staff conclusion that the 2021 low return numbers are a result of ocean conditions and not the effects of the hatchery program. We disagree with the Commission's decision to terminate the hatchery program for 3 reasons. First, the decision is not supported by ODFW's assessment and is inconsistent with ODFW's staff recommendation. 2, the decision would negatively affect tribal members who already have very limited opportunities to practice their traditional lifeways and culture. And finally, this was a last-minute surprise decision that was made without notice or consultation with affected tribes. In addition, we'd like to point out that the 2022 wild summer steelhead escapement numbers, while still low, were a dramatic improvement from 2021 numbers. We'd like to see the hatchery program remain in place while wild returns continue to build, rather than the Commission taking the drastic, culturally deaf, and scientifically unsupported action of terminating the hatchery program altogether. Finally, I'd like to point out that my testimony today does not constitute tribal consultation. Tribal consultation is a two-way dialogue with tribal leadership, in our case, tribal council. Most importantly, consultation needs to be meaningful and it needs to take place before a decision is made. An invitation to provide public testimony after a decision has been made does not constitute tribal consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. And Ashley Russell, if you will go ahead.
Daichil, Galagahais, Ashley Russell, Sinsanu, Milkmapu, Kika Au. So good day. Hello, everyone, chair, vice chair, commission members. Ashley Russell, I am called. I'm a Milik Coos and Pamunkey tribal person. I'm also assistant director of the Cultural Natural Resources Department for the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lorem Quan Sayusla Indians. My colleague, Colin Beck, and I were asked by our tribal council chair, Brad Nieper, to attend this meeting as he didn't receive ample enough time to plan for attendance. We appreciate the ability to speak on behalf of my tribe on fish and wildlife issues that affect our culture and lifeways. I just wanted to reiterate the fact that the place provides the culture and the culture stewards the place. Our landscape has defined us for millennia. It has influenced our language and songs, practices, which are unique features of our identity. We've developed traditions, stories, and ceremonies associated with what we are provided from these lands. And salmon is one of the cornerstones of our culture. It's one of the cornerstones of a lot of Pacific Northwest tribes, as you've heard from a lot of my sister tribes today. And we just like to ask that the commission rescind their decision to discontinue the summer steelhead hatchery program, as steelhead is also, lumped in with salmon, and that it is very important to us as tribal people. And without the salmon and without the steelhead, we wouldn't be able to practice our culture, and we wouldn't be Native people as we know it. I'd also like to reiterate, and this is going to be sound repetitive because a lot of my sister tribes represented here today also spoke to this, but this again isn't considered tribal consultation. Tribal consultation is a government to government process, which means that meetings are negotiated between reps of both governments at a time and place that is agreed upon. Setting up a meeting, inviting tribes to attend, and setting aside a time for them to speak is not considered consultation to us. And again, repetitive, but consultation also happens before a decision is made. But again, I want to say thank you to everyone who presented today. Even some of the information that was presented before this time slot was beneficial. And I appreciate all of the tribes that spoke here today. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. Gala, thank you.
Thank you. I don't see questions at this point, Ashley, I don't see questions from the commissioners. Either for you or for staff, I would like to mention that we do appreciate a great deal the people that were here in the room and the people who were online providing the information. You can be assured that you are well heard and appreciated, including the comments about what is and isn't consultation. We recognize that. We did think it was important to respond to the request to hear additional information and appreciate the chance to do that today. And I would just repeat, you're well heard and appreciated. And so I think we will stop there unless there are any other comments. And if there, go ahead, Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde, and then we'll take a break after.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I would also like to thank all of the various sovereigns for taking their time today and coming and speaking to the commission on this issue. I would just challenge us as a commission to consider reconsidering this decision. And I just like to kind of get a sense of if that's possible for us to not, obviously not at this meeting, but reconsider this decision and work more on doing that within a respectful forum of a true government to government relationship, kind of bumbling around on how to say all this. This is the truth. The truth of it is we're humans trying to make complex decisions with ourselves and with other sovereigns. So that's just, I kind of was hoping that maybe that could be considered.
I'll let Commissioner Lampart speak first, and then I'll come back to that, your request.
Okay, thank you, Chair Wall. I'd also like to support that, and I'll just call it a tribal discussion today, and I very, very much appreciate the tribes have an opportunity to weigh in on this discussion. So the department in the previous testimony that they provided, there was a significant amount of, I would say, biologists and scientists and doctors that participated in the staff report that we reviewed. Sean has validated that, and I believe staff in their proposal that releasing more hatchery fish did not correlate with a decrease in the wild fish productivity. I think the tribes have validated that. I think the majority of the hatchery and wild fish spawning are spawning in different locations. I think the science has shown that. I don't want to lose the connection with the fish and the culture that the tribes have presented to us. I believe pretty strongly, and I think at least two tribes mentioned this, that it's a PHOS issue, and the department is very clearly aware that this is a PHOS issue and that it can be addressed in a way that is acceptable to, I think, the wild fish advocates, the hatchery folks, the tribe, the general public. So I don't have any other notes on this, but I think that with the MOA that we signed with the tribes, with at least two tribes, it's really important that we speak to that process of collaboratively working together. Ocean productivity has increased, and I agree with Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde. I think it's time that we revisit our previous decision and have a further discussion on it.
Just go ahead, Commissioner King.
Thank you, Chair Wall. While I understand everyone's, this is a new day, like we made a decision almost a year ago and now we have new information. I would state that several of us, not just myself, but many of us asked, were the tribes consulted prior to all of our deliberations and all of the information that we got and the midnight letters and all of it? We asked specifically, were the tribes consulted? And every single one of us was told yes. So I would say I'm a bit confused by now people saying they weren't consulted when in fact we were told that they were consulted. So I think really, maybe it's defining what we all consider consultation, and maybe that's a cultural difference and we need to come to terms with that. But I really kind of almost take offense with saying that this was done without consultation, because we did ask did that occur? And so I really would have to say that yes, we have new information, but all of it is murky and none of it is clear. Nothing about this situation was clear. Nothing about this decision was clear or easy. And rehashing it, I don't think that we're going to get any clearer. I don't think this is ever going to be that. So I think maybe we just need to move forward and get clarity on, quote, what is consultation specifically? Because if they felt that we did not do that, then moving forward, let's talk about how we change it. So that's where I would.
Here's how I would respond. This one is not easy, no matter how you look at it. Here's how I would respond to what I just heard and what we heard earlier and the situation that we're in. And it's this. We made it clear that we were not going to make a decision today and that this wasn't an action item. And I think that we need to respect that and stick with that. We also have, as has been mentioned a couple times, a court case still to be acted upon that could be a factor in all of this. We've heard a great deal of information today. We heard a huge amount of information and went through a huge amount of information before we made our decision in April. And I feel like we need to today respect the fact that we said that we would not make a decision today. If we do that in the future, then we need to let the public know. There are all of the tribes, of course, but there are other people that are interested in this one, would want to weigh in on this one, and we'd have to go through that process again. So with all due respect, I think that that's what we need to do today is recognize what we heard, respect what we heard, and respect that we told the public and the world that we would not make a decision today. So I would like to end there if we could and take a break. And seeing no objection.
I'll second it. How about that?
I think we'll end there, and with great thanks to all of the people who testified for us. So thank you. Let's come back in 10 minutes and we will do, we will try to finish the agenda. We have public forum minutes and 2 very short agenda items. And then we have an executive session as a possibility, or at more than a possibility. We will have the executive session.